I now call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order at 7:19 p.m. We'll take a moment of silence to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Mr. Dixon?
Present.
Mr. Rollins?
Here.
Mr. Scrivano?
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch? Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Mr. Escobedo?
Here.
With 7 present, we have a quorum.
Before we go any further, I'd like to thank Rod and Connor in the back who are helping to produce our excellent broadcast on Channel 20 for the community. So thank you guys for all you do. I don't believe we have any speakers for tonight, so I don't get to read the comments thing. And the state level competitors are coming back on another day, I hear, or something. So when the weather's maybe a little bit better. So are there any board member comments at this time? Mr. Connor.
I got two, and they're both kind of personal, but one, I know we were supposed to be neutral on the schools, but being an East Side grad, I have to tell you, I'm going to brag and say, how fabulous are those ERAB basketball players?
All right.
Sorry, but
Okay.
I showed the article in the paper, and it was a great article, to some guys up in Wisconsin who were just awestruck by how great they are. So congratulations, really fabulous. Second thing is, while it applies to all veterans, I know there was an article on John Logeman going overseas, so thanks again to all those who serve us, first responders. We don't say it enough, thank you. John, thank you.
Good. Mr. Dixon.
Yes, I just want to thank the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders that sent the letter explaining how they feel. And so what I normally go to elementary schools and just have a conversation and speak with students and say, well, the board wants to hear your opinion, wants to hear what you have to say, and they actually did it. So thank you for that. And the second part is we had a wonderful time at going to Cherry Valley Elementary School. Me and State Representative West Witt, and it was the first time I've been inside, and since it's been built, and it was beautiful. I mean, it was one of a kind. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Siegel.
Mr. Connor, I just want to let you know that on Friday night we'll find out how great those East basketball players are when they play Auburn.
Okay.
Mother Nature permitting.
You know, all I can say is, I know we can't bet, but we'll talk.
All right, very good. I can't even think of anything else I want to say on comments, so I'm just going to shut up. So we'll move ahead then on to the consent portion of our agenda, including the following items. The meeting minutes of our January 22nd, 2019 board meeting, payroll, accounts payable, purchase orders, contracts under $10,000, construction bid request log and travel, the bid recommendations for the chronic care management service and the West Middle School piping upgrades phase 2, the recurring contracts for the interior design for our library renovations, the A to Z for McIntosh Elementary program update, the other consent items including the workers' compensation settlement agreement for LD and the Freedom of Information log. Is there a motion and a second to approve these consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Second by Mr. Dixon. Any consent items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Ms. McCulloch.
I'll do 8A and 9A, please.
8A and 9A. Any others? Mr. Connor?
8B.
Okay. Okay, anything else? If not, I'll have the coroner then call the roll on the approval of the consent items not pulled.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. I'll now take a motion and a second to approve the item 8A, which is the Chronic Care Management Service.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. McCulloch. Questions or discussion? Mrs. McCulloch.
Yeah, obviously, we voted for this before, and I just wasn't real familiar with it, and I just wanted a little bit of a report on it. I don't have, it looks like we want to move people into this chronic care management category, and that we pay per person in the district, so the more people we have in there, the less we're really paying per person. But if you could just speak a little bit to what do they do?
Yeah, I will turn it over to Ines Harris, the benefits manager, to discuss kind of what chronic care management is.
Good evening. Chronic care management is basically an approach through healthcare with dealing with chronic conditions that individuals have. And the hope is that using this program that you focus on the people that are higher cost, have higher risk, and so it's a structured program where it saves also towards the dollars that you spend towards your health care.
Well, I get that. How did y'all come up with we're going to save we saved $732,000 this last year by spending $264 on this program? I mean, how did you come up with the number?
Well, those numbers that we came up with are actually from our previous provider, and the $263,000 was dollar savings, and then the $732,000 was from avoidance. And the dollar savings is, the actual savings came from the structured care savings as far as having primary doctors and such that they go
I don't
to.
understand. Okay. I just need to talk to somebody. I'm sure the rest of you all understand, but I'm not understanding exactly.
The avoidance, the 732 basically are things such as preventive care, and then educating people so that they pretty much don't have as many hospital visits or stays.
It's such an exact number, it just makes me wonder how because it's a guesstimate, right? It is an estimate. That's pretty
yes,
much where I'm going.
It is.
The 264 was actually a number that was brought to us in the reports that were provided through our current chronic care management company, OSF, and they kind of laid it out in the reports that they showed us. The avoidance tends to be a little bit more of a soft number. It's always more difficult to determine the claim that never occurred. So, we talk about those things a little bit more of a soft number, but the 264 really is based on as we take these individuals who are running at very high cost levels, and then we see those costs start to come down as they're in the program, as they're involved, as they're more directly involved with doctors. One of the big issues that we see with chronic care is these are the high utilizers. These are the folks that tend to be churning a lot of dollars. This is probably a number that everybody showed before, but 5% of your population chews up about 55% of your overall health care dollars. And so those are the people that we're really targeting here, and as we get them more involved, not just with their own primary care doctor, which we're not seeking to replace, but putting additional resources on the table to help them manage those conditions, that does tend to deliver results and starting to see a better managed condition, cost less dollars. But remember that money isn't the only thing that we're looking at here. We're also looking for a better quality of life for the individual, as well as then for the district. You have people who are at work more often, more persistency in those things as well. So that's really what we're looking at here, is helping to bring resources to people who are currently dealing with these chronic care managements, these chronic care conditions. Does that help to answer your question
It
a little
does.
bit better?
Yeah. And on top of this, we have a wellness program, but that is more targeted toward the whole population, not to the chronic.
Correct. And actually, the wellness program is designed really to help people, first, to help people stay well. For those who may be moving in a direction that's not well, through the screenings, we help to identify people who may have situations. For those people who are already in a chronic condition, the wellness is really not going to help them. We need something a little bit more high-powered to assist them in managing their condition.
And OSF just got out of the business.
So it seems. They did not answer the RFP, and we notified them, let them know what was going on, so.
Thank you. I'm sorry to take so much time.
Typically, what I've seen, because I have a healthcare background too, is that these providers of the service hire nurse case managers who are assigned a caseload of patients that are in this category, and then they communicate with them very often and very regular and say, have you weighed yourself? Do you have ankle swelling today? All those kinds of chronic issue things or whatever to help prevent emergency room visits and hospitalizations and that kind of stuff. Correct, Mr. Zetterberg?
That is correct, and it also focuses on the family, because a lot of times when you see these individuals that have chronic care issues, that it impacts children and impacts the wife, which then brings the stress piece into it, which contributes to more conditions. So there is typically a nurse or a social worker that's involved that has that structured program for check-in, so that they're treating not just the physical, but the emotional piece too, because it ends up becoming a lifestyle change. And other people in the household are impacted by having more than one chronic disease that they're dealing with.
Okay. Any other questions? Now I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of item 8A, the chronic care management service.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scribano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Our next item is item 8B, which is the West Middle School piping upgrades Phase 2. Is there a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Questions or discussion? Mr. Connor?
I actually just have two quick questions. I should have sent these, my apologies in advance. The first is, and I see Mr. Phillips up there, so did you do this one? Because you might want to answer the questions.
Come on down.
Come on down. One is, if I remember correctly, the original estimate for fixing the piping at West was in the neighborhood of $1 million, wasn't it?
That
Something
is
like
correct. So last year, the board did approve the West piping project for $1 million. It was broken into two phases. Last year's phase was for $400,000,
Okay.
and phase 2 is $600,000.
Okay, so it is roughly about $1 million. That's what I was going to ask, so that total cost. Then the second question is maybe, I hope, straightforward, which is, there were some concerns, because I know that the piping, there was concern about what the real issue was over the long haul, if what we were doing was going to fix it. And so is there pretty much a good feeling that, that these phases together are going to help this permanently? Because full disclosure, I know it's been a while since we've talked about this, that there was some concern about the piping at West because it was unique to them and the way the piping was done. And so there was a little bit of long-term concern. So that's why I'm bringing it up.
My understanding is the piping that was removed was a galvanized pipe, which over time does break down and start to leak. We've replaced that with copper. So phase 1 of this project was what I would consider the main north-south section of the building. We are picking up the pool area and the west section, as well as the alternate is to pick up the auditorium section or the far south section. So with this second phase, we are in fact touching all the domestic piping in the building.
So we're not likely to have another request in a year from now around the piping, is what I'm hearing?
For domestic piping, that is correct.
Okay. Maybe international piping? Just thought I'd ask.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
So domestic is our hot and cold water that serves our kitchens, drinking fountains, showers. I don't know if our heating piping had been inspected or not, but for our domestic water, we are fine. So after this phase 2, we will have touched everything. No, that does not include sanitary piping.
Good question, then. Okay. Thank you. I'll have Courtney then call the roll on the approval of item 8B, the West Middle School piping upgrades.
Mr. Scarano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo? Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. I'll now take a motion for item 9A, which is the interior design for the facility master plan library renovations. Is there a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. It was a race down there, okay. Questions or comments? Mrs. McCulloch?
Not so much about the contract, I already had that conversation with Ms. Hoadley, but we often talk about what belongs under recurring contracts, Ms. Hoadley. So, is this we haven't had a contract with them to do interior design of our libraries before. Is it a recurring contract just because we've had other contracts with them?
Yes, for similar, same or similar, so it is architectural services.
Thank you. That was it.
Any other comments or questions? Now I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of 9A, the facility master plan library renovation interior design.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scarano?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We'll move on then to closed session consent agenda items, including the following: the appointment of Corey Schrank as a 10-month high school assistant principal at Jefferson High School, the appointment of Jamie Murray as a 12-month executive director of finance, the appointment of Carissa Bry as a 12-month program administrator for special education, and the HR organizational report and addendum, and the closed session items for student discipline. Unless otherwise modified below, the board adopts and accepts the hearing officer's findings and recommendations in the following cases in which students expelled or suspended are prohibited from being on school grounds and school-sponsored activities without the prior written permission of the principal. Student 4221 is expelled for the remainder of this school year and all of the 1920 school year. Student 4253 is expelled for the remainder of this school year through the first semester of next school year. Student 2040 is, the expulsion is held in abeyance contingent upon an EIA agreement for the remainder of this school year through the second trimester of next school year. And student 4252, the expulsion is held in abeyance contingent upon an EIA agreement for the remainder of this school year. And the following students received the EIAs: student 1038, 1039, 1040, 3688, 3738, 3740, 3744, student 3745, 3746, 3747, 3748, 3749, 3750, student 3751, 3752, 3753, 3754, 3756, 3757, and 3758. Is there a motion and a second to approve the closed session consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Dixon. Are there any items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Seeing none, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the closed session consent items.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scarano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the superintendent's report. Dr. Jarrett.
In the new business, we are going to have two fairly lengthy reports. We have a report from ZR on basically that will be fairly comprehensive, and I also have Dr. Munson's Illinois Empower report, both of which we wanted to vet and get started at the shortened committee of the whole meeting. So as a result, I'm going to cede my time to the later portion of the meeting and devote it to their hard work.
Thank you. We'll move on then to action items. The first action item is the Bellis Firm of Architecture, Design Services, and Construction Administration for the removal and replacement of walk-in freezer at Flynn Middle School. Is there a motion and a second to approve the same? Moved by Mr. Connor. Second by Mr. Dixon. Any questions or discussion? Thank you. Go ahead and call the roll. I thought Mr. Dixon was going to hit his button there. He looked like he was going to hit it. Okay, great, okay. Okay.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo? Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Our second action item is the Quavers Marvelous World of Music Elementary Music Resource Adoption. That was presented by Mr. Doring. Is there a motion and a second to approve this item?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Rollins. Any questions or discussion? Mr. Connor?
The only thing that I'll reiterate, which I said at Committee of the Whole, which is true for B, C, D, and probably E, is that I know you had talked about the metrics, and I think that's the one thing I want to be clear about, what's being tracked and what will be reported on a regular period of time. And I know there were some ideas, but I think it would be good to articulate kind of exactly what would be expected on a regular review of the metrics, because I know there was some good thought to it, but I'll have that, I'm not going to say the same comment, but it's for all those.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Now I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of our second action item, the Marvelous World of Music Elementary Music Resource Adoption.
Mr. Escobedo? Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Our next item is the Hal Leonard Essential Elements and J.W. Foundation Secondary Music Resource Adoption that was presented by Mr. Doring. Is there a motion and a second to approve this item?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? Mr. Connor?
I'm only going to say that Hal Leonard is a blast from the past. You're as old as I am, and if you remember, Hal Leonard was like all the beginning books. So it's like, I feel like I'm back to the future now all of a sudden.
Okay.
You know, wasn't this in place when I was a kid? So,
Okay. It might be Hal Leonard Jr. Okay, no.
this would probably be the third.
Okay, I know. Somebody else had a light on down here. Okay, all right. Thank you. Have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the secondary music resource adoption.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Our next item is the argument-driven inquiry secondary science resource adoption presented by Mr. Allen. Is there any questions or, I'll take a motion first.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Second by Mr. Dixon. Now I'll ask if there's any questions or discussion. Mr. Connor.
The one thing I neglected to say at the Committee of the Whole is that the academic papers, which were snooze, I'll tell you again, but the nice thing was, what I found encouraging was, there was a section talking about, if you will, equal access and the expectation of equal results on this argument-driven, which I thought was a powerful argument. So I will say that was well thought through. Glad that you attached that, because some of the criticism of some of this might be that for some of our students it may not be as accessible, but it really sounded like a lot of thought had been put into this, and that there was research behind the fact that all kids can succeed with this program. So I was really glad to see that, because it's a continuing concern of the board that all students be able to be successful day one with the programs we do.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, on the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the secondary science resource adoption.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Our next item is the Core Connections Integrated Math 2 Resource Adoption presented by Mr. Epperson. Is there a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Dixon. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, on the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the Secondary Math 2 Resource Adoption.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Seacom?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Our next item is the District Management Group Building Capacity and Academic Return on Investment that was presented by Dr. Jarrett. Is there a motion and a second to approve this item?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. Any questions or discussion? Thank you. Mr. Escobedo.
So, I guess I'm prepared to stand alone on this one, but you know, we've had a lot of discussion on this, and I'm still not, I guess, you know, I have reservations. But, you know, last meeting, there was a comment actually from Dr. Jared stating that a lot of these programs that we have in place, over 80% of these, if implemented properly, driven properly, would be successful, or something along those lines. What I'm getting to add is that, you know, I've heard that we've got one of the most competent administrations that we've had in a long time. We've got a lot of initiatives already in place. We've also had history from teachers that and staff that are reluctant when we roll out new initiatives because they are just kind of waiting on wait-and-see mode before the initiative gets taken off. There's also a lot of knowledge that will be developed during a lot of this effort that I'm afraid that this is knowledge that needs to be acquired within administration. I guess I just have a concern because we are not keeping our commitment to our initial initiatives that we rolled out. And if we look back for, you know, the last 3 years, 3.5 years, every initiative that's been rolled out, there's been some type of data, there's been a lot of vetting, there's been a lot of background work done to verify that this, if implemented properly, will drive the desired results. You know, there's just a lot of money to spend in this effort, and I think we are in a more immediate need where a lot of this money could be invested in, say, other of the existing initiatives that are already in place to make them work, whether it's tutors, whether it's rolling out more multi-layer classroom cohorts. And I'm just afraid that this will be more of a distraction and less confident in our staff to support any future initiatives. And again, we need to keep our commitment for the initiatives that have been rolled out. This doesn't address the issue of driving every classroom with rigor, consistency, and engagement at the classroom level. So I'm just afraid that this is a lot of, we get into this analysis paralysis, I've said before, where we want to analyze and absolutely, but I just feel that we're not hitting the root cause here, that we're touching the peripherals, but we're actually not focusing, and this may be a distraction. So I just thank you for your understanding. It's not a light decision. It's been a very tough decision.
Mr. Siegel.
When I first saw this and had a conference call with Dr. Jarrett about this, we really went round and round, and I was very dubious about the introduction of another entity coming in, analyzing our curriculum and our implementation, when I too felt like we had a very qualified staff who really were motivated and focused on doing the right things. But the thing that kind of turned me over was the fact that we are going to leave in place those people who are going to really be focused on undoing our alignment, starting with the students, and we are going to have yet another entity who's going to come in, look at those programs that we've been using, and start scrubbing some of those things out. For whatever reason, yes, we've had all kinds of justification and analysis given to us in order to allow us to buy different contracts and programs. Some of them have worked, some of them have not worked. But I think District Management Group is going to help us realize that we ended up buying some things that we ought not have had, and help us stop using some of those things that have been ineffective. Essentially, they're going to take all those things that we have thrown up against the wall to see if it would stick. They're going to peel them off. And by clearing out some of that wall space, we might see a little more clearly those things that are going to work. I do really hope that that ends up being the case. I do hope that all of those curriculum departments that are going to work to stay focused on the students will have more energy and time and dedication to that particular effort. I feel fairly confident that they will, largely just by having a lot of the things that haven't worked cleaned up.
Thank you. Ms. McCullough.
One of my biggest questions is, so we have this 2 years to do this, and what we're looking for is, will it drive up the scores on our report cards? They're not our report cards, what are they? Scorecards. I don't really have a comprehension for what the deliverable is. I mean, do they have to go up a certain percent? Because they've said they will stay with us until we have achieved what? I mean, it's a 2-year contract, but it does state in here that we're going to, you know, and we had that conversation with Nate, was we're going to do whatever we need to do to deliver. How do we know? What is it exactly? I'd like it in the record, what they're going to deliver. Is there a number? What are we?
So I think that's an excellent question. When we talk about work stream 2, we're talking about strategic budgeting. And what we are betting is that, and what we believe that this contract will deliver, is we have our greatest investment is, and the greatest lever for student achievement is our teachers, and you don't maximize impact with teachers without a huge investment in your principals. And what we're investing in with Workstream 2, which is the largest chunk of this contract, is a strong belief that I have that, number one, we need to give our principals more resources. 2, we need to give them more control over those resources. And 3, if we are going to do 1 and 2, we have to make sure that they have built the capacity to use those resources strategically. And so with that great increase in accountability, I think it is only right that we give them additional autonomy and additional support to use those resources effectively. Most principals in their principal training programs and in their previous professional experiences did not come up as budget managers or people that were doing this kind of rigorous analysis. And so I think this will be an excellent investment in our principals, which will drive student achievement at the scorecard level. I think that's really the work of Workstream 2. What Workstream 1 does is it takes 3 other existing core processes, any Goal 1 related PDSA that comes forward as we build our capacity there, and gives us the ability to tie that to the return on investment so we can be very specific about the students that it will support on the front end, on the cost in terms of not just dollars but also staff time, and what the specific measurable will be. And I think we're finally in a position as a district, as we've built the quality of our data warehouse and our budget and finance team, that we have the capacity to do that work. The second thing is, if we are going to commit to a new 5-year strategic plan, we will have a very clear deliverable through the initiative inventory, where we will essentially be able to, I don't think I could have said it any better than Mr. Siegel did, in terms of really clearing out that space before we add new initiatives. I think there's a huge opportunity in that area as well. And the final piece is the annual budgeting process, we will be committing as a district to taking a high-level look at a maximum of 3 very comprehensive studies or analyses on big rollouts that we have in place in the district that are tied to Goal 1 to ensure that we've done that work. So I think the deliverables will come week to week as we deliver future board proposals, but the biggest payoff in terms of student achievement and the fastest payoff, I believe, will be combined with our strategy of giving schools more dollars in their hands. It would be malpractice for us not to equip our principals with those skill sets they need to invest those dollars in a way that will maximize them and go as far as possible. So I think this really goes together with a strategy that we're betting really big on here.
Okay, so let me be more succinct then. I mean, the success of site-based budgeting will be monitored by year-to-year improvement in school scorecards, overall improvement on Goal 1 in IAR, NSAT, and graduation rate and on-track rate. So if...
You literally want to just know how we're going to measure it. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I went way too conceptual, my apology. All of our schools will be evaluated on a 1 to 100 point scale. 70% of that will be tied to achievement, 20% of that will be another 10% with our scorecard. So 100 points, essentially. We will look at all of our schools every year to see that they are making progress on those 100 points. And so we want every school to be making year-over-year progress. So
then we have a 2-year contract, and at the end of 2 years, if every school in the district has not made gains on their scorecard, that means they're not done with us.
No, they are training us as an organization and leaving one way or the other at the end of these 2 fiscal years with the knowledge behind that we have the organizational capacity to train our principals, but we will be working with our current principals to make sure that they have this capacity to do strategic budgeting so that year after, they aren't doing it for us. They are building the capacity of our principals and our people who train principals in our district office to ensure that we have a capacity we don't have right now, which is to make sure all of our buildings are able to gain additional control over their budgets and spend that money in a way that will maximize results.
So basically, we're going to see the inventory, and we're going to see that all the that the principals are all trained in their site-based management. Those are the 2 things that we're going to get.
Workstream 2, you will see that all the principals will be trained and have the ability to do that, and that will be sustained. Workstream 1, you will see 3 things. 1, you will see it in the PDSAs that come forward that are tied to Goal 1. 2, you will see it in the initiative inventory before we do the 2025 strategic plan. 3, you will see 3 projects per year that reflect either forward-facing or backward-facing analysis of a big investment that's tied to Goal 1. And that will become an organizational habit moving forward after they leave. Every year, we will have that capacity built in to do 3 big analyses.
Okay, so that's helpful. When we had our conversation last time when we were here at the Committee of the Whole, and, you know, my concern again is organizationally getting our staff to move forward with their true belief that every student can achieve, that to really get staff buy-in to the district, to know that our teachers are there because their passion is to work with students and teach students and help students learn, not because they're just punching a clock and coming to work every day and doing us a favor by being there. So to make that change, you know, that transition so that we have the majority of our teachers at, Nate spoke about, and I couldn't think of the word last time, remember, was adaptive change. And he said you need to have at least 75% of the organization, that's the number I have down here, to make that work. And so how are we going to know if that part of it, because he said that was part of their job, was to take this, and this is what I'm supporting. I love the inventory piece, the PDA piece. I think site-based is important. But as I said previously, the the board, the administration, I think we have a fairly good relationship with our staff, but we haven't been able to make that organizational shift. And so, not with enough percentage of people. And so, I don't know what they're going to do different, but how will we know that they've been successful? Are we just going to say because of these numbers that we know that they were successful?
Well, I think that's how we will measure the success year over year, is are we making progress? But I think you're really honing in on an excellent issue, which is culture. And I think ultimately, there's two ways to look at how we will improve achievement in all of our schools. One method would be everything should be tightly centralized, and that we should make all of these budgeting decisions from a central perspective and give very little autonomy to the school sites to make those investments. What I believe strongly, and why I support and bring this proposal forward, is I think a very highly centralized strategy will inhibit our ability to grow that culture and to improve that culture, because I think there's less ownership. I think it builds in the district office picked the wrong this, or the district office made me hire that person instead of this person. So as we give additional freedom, I believe that autonomy will drive morale and engagement to a higher level than what we can do centrally. That's ultimately the bet we are making here, but I don't feel comfortable doing that without the safety net of very significant additional training.
Thank you.
Mr. Connor?
I thought there have been some good points. The one that I think Mr. Escobedo made last time, and also at Committee of the Whole, was this can't be a distraction. So I think I'm going to go a little moniker, and I'm going to call it, the district has to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, is going to be the name of this. Okay. And that's because, on the one hand, we have to have a framework and and make sure that we have that, but at the same time, we have to engage, and as Mrs. McCulloch said, we really have to have a way that staff, particularly teachers, feel this is relevant to them. And so what I'll say is that we've got two work streams is really what we're paying for. The first is essentially, in one sense, it's too bad we have to use the word budget, because this is not about finances. This is about the programs that one funds. So obviously that turns into a budget, but I think the fact is that for me, the results are that at that school level, we have programs, and that those programs are evaluated on the impact on achievement. I think that's exactly the point. And so we have a framework that will be developed, and then work stream 2, and that's work stream 1, and then work stream 2, which I said last time is something that I think transparently we've talked about it as a board, is it does come down to leadership by principals. And one of the things that you can do is see school by school, where do they put their money, and what kinds of things do they do, and how successful they are. So one of the key deliverables for me personally is that we have this framework, and then you can measure how it's been applied school by school, and what were those results. I think that's exactly what I'm seeing. And my one comment is that all these programs are always a leap of faith. I've said this, and I know people hate the analogy, but we are like a medium-large corporation. We have an operating budget right around $400 million. That makes us big. So we have to have some things that provides frameworks and what I'll call standards, but it is up to each individual unit, e.g. school, to make sure that this works. And so I think the one thing I'll say is that almost as a cautionary tale, especially given some of the commentary, is that in a year and in 2 years, if the administration were to have a similar kind of program, I think you would run, I'm not predicting, but it would seem to me there'd be a lot more hesitation and a lot more pushback on that. So a lot is riding on this program, and a lot is riding on those that are going to do the work, meaning the outside part, but it also is how do we get the people that work for Rockford Public Schools to feel this is relevant to them and what they can do out of this and the changes and the way they make this better. So I will say I will vote for yes for this as a leap of faith, but I've given my caveats, and in particular, the fact that we should look for the results, and we should really hold the schools accountable, e.g. the principals and the staff.
Mr. Siegel, are you next, or Mr. Rollins? Mr. Rollins.
I'm just going to repeat some of the themes, I guess. I mean, those of you who have listened to me enough over the years know that I'm not a big fan of consultants who are spending a lot of money, but this has the potential, if it works, to have such a fundamental impact, I think, on the way we operate for the better, that I am willing to, using Mr. Connor's phrase, take a leap of faith on this one. My one caveat is, and Dr. Jarrett has already sort of touched on it, and we've had these discussions over the years as well, when you bring in these consultants, if they come in for a year or 2 years and then they're gone, and you haven't internalized it, then that's just a waste of money. Now, the expectation is, we've had a lot of internal talks about this, the expectation is that we will internalize this in a way that regardless of staff turnover, that whatever we get out of this, we will be able to replicate within the district going forward. And so I'm just going to say now, if that doesn't happen, this is a waste of money. So I really hope that we have an emphasis on that we do what we need to do. There's been talk about having an internal staff position to support it. If we're going to do this, we need to do the things that we need to do in order to make sure that it really does get internalized, and that regardless of staff turnover going forward, that, you know, we can replicate this, continue this culture, have people trained to do it, have people who can train other people to do it, and you get my drift.
Thanks. Mr. Siegel.
And speaking of training, I didn't see anywhere in the proposal that there was a component for board training to make us better judges of the proposals that are brought to us, that might help us more closely scrutinize what's going to be effective, what isn't. And will the board have any review over those programs that are likely to get scrubbed?
Absolutely. We'll just have to make sure we comply with the Open Meetings Act, but I'd be happy if there's board interest to provide board-specific training, or also invite board members to sit in on key trainings. There's, for example, a budget simulation exercise that is really, really valuable that I would love to expose you to. There's some great activities and opportunities to learn. So
Can't wait for that.
yeah. Yes, it's a real hoot. We'll do it on Saturday night.
Okay.
Can I point out, nothing we do is a hoot? So it's like,
That's true. I guess I just want to ask one more question, and that is, the responsibility for this program's success will fall under curriculum? Is that where you're going to have it?
There's going to be a combination. I am going to personally manage this contract with the support of Michelle in finance, and in partnership with the schools team on work stream 2, and with the partnership of the curriculum and our continuous improvement team with work stream 1. So it's going to be all hands on deck. Everybody will be involved in this training in some way or another, but I am personally going to drive this because I think this is that important to the organization.
Okay, thanks. Okay, the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of item F, which is the District Management Group Building Capacity and Academic Return on Investment.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
No.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 no.
Thank you. We'll move on to new business, and Mrs. Yar is going to present the fiscal year 2019 second quarter treasurer's report.
As Mrs. Yar is getting set up, I just wanted to commend her. There's some things you're going to see in the treasurer's report that are, I think, somewhat atypical, and some really, I think, exciting things to share, particularly in the way that we're finding new ways to utilize dollars to maximize raising interest rates. Really, really proud of her work and her performance in finding additional resources for students, and I think the treasurer's report really reflects that. So I will turn it over to Mrs. Yar.
Thank you, Dr. Jarrett. Good evening. As Dr. Jarrett talked about, I have prepared the treasurer's report, and I'm just going to hit the highlights of this treasurer's report. So this is as of December 31st, 2018, so I will start to do this on a quarterly basis. It is not. Okay, so the three things I'm going to be covering tonight are really the FY19 projections, the investments, and the future strategies for those investments. So for the operating funds, which is really Fund 10, 17, you'll see this in the CAFR that we prepare at year end. So those funds, we're projecting a 2.8 net increase. And our non-operating, the capital, is a $34.3 million net decrease. This is the bond funds that we're really spending and what we expect to have happen. And the internal service fund, this is the health insurance fund. So this is a separate fund for the district. It's important to note that we're projecting right now at a $2.2 million net increase for that fund. We're monitoring this on a monthly and quarterly basis because that can change very quickly with claims that come in. So there's three trends that have happened that are higher than budget. We've had evidence-based funding come in this year at $1.5 million more than what was projected. And then we have CPP-RT, thank you, at $500,000 more than what we budgeted. So our budgeting estimates were good, but we just came in a little bit better. We were being a little conservative with evidence-based funding, and we really had to do a 6-year trend or a 5-year trend on that. And because general state aid went to now evidence-based funding, we projected the low amount of that 6-year trend. And then the investment income, we've actively managed that for the past year and a half. So we've increased that over the budget of $500,000. Right now, for December 31st, we've already exceeded our budget for the interest income due to market change and, like I said, actively managing that. So we've had some decreased expenses, so our vacancies are higher than expected. I put this in red because we really don't want this to happen. It's $1.2 million, but it does have a positive budget impact, but again, this is not what we want to see because most of this is teacher vacancies. Our cash and investments are currently at December 31st, we're at $187 million. So we have $170 million that are unrestricted and $17 million restricted. So unrestricted really means that we can spend it for anything really for our purpose of student achievement and our program in essence. Restricted is really the bond funds. So what I wanted to do is show the mix that you normally would see in your personal investment portfolio. I wanted to see this isn't what you see on a monthly basis, so I thought it was important to share this. So when you're looking at this, you would probably ask yourself, why do I have so much money sitting in the money market account? We have some 6% sitting in CDs, and then we have agencies and other investments. So I'll talk about that money market in just another slide or two. So the Fed fund rate, one night I talked about how the Fed funds were changing, and it changed last year for calendar year 18. It moved 8 times. So each one of those times I called the bank and negotiated, can we get a higher rate? So that really impacts when you're carrying $180 million of investments, that can make a big difference in our interest earnings, which we have seen. I did get one more bump that's not included on that Fed fund rate. I was going to move some money over, and because I got a better rate basically, so I'm shopping that around, and they gave me another bump even though it really wasn't a Fed rate move. So now with the RFP that we awarded for Associated Bank, and that's who we've been using, I have this tied in so I don't have to call the bank every time the Fed fund rate changes. And we do expect that to get a little bit of more of a bump in the next year, but it's not going to look like this. So I wanted to show a graph of the investment income. So you can clearly see since FY18, we've doubled that investment income. So we have another $1.2 million I'm projecting for 19. So that's a really good increase. I've also, in the last couple of years, been looking at laddering investments. When a couple of years ago, we had $10 million sitting in one CD and $30 million sitting in another CD. So we had 2 CDs tied up for $40 million. That is really hard when you're looking at daily cash needs. So I wanted to work on this ladder. So I've been working on the ladder. It's still a little heavy on the front end, but if you think interest rates are going to rise, you don't want to lock in your investments long-term because your expectation is that you're going to be able to do better in another year or two. So this is what our ladder looks like right now. This doesn't include the Illinois School District Liquid Asset Fund. This is coming out of, I use Clearwater Investments. We got that basically, I was going to purchase it, but we got it for free through Fifth Third Bank, so we do some investments there, and I'm able to grab all of this data without really much work at all. I also look at the cash flow analysis because in order for me to know what to invest, I have to make sure we meet our daily cash needs. So this is what our cash flow looks like for the district. You can see where we get our property taxes in. We get them in September, November, we're still, looking pretty good. And then by March and April, we have a low point. Our low point is typically around $40 million. Evidence-based funding has helped a little bit with that. But then you can see in June, we get some property tax payments again, and now we start to see an uptick as well. By state statute, we're allowed very safe investments. We have to really use CDs, muni funds, or muni bonds, and then really safe funds. So these are allowable investments on the slide before you. So I talked about my goal, and our goal is to meet the daily cash needs. So that's the first goal. I also look at the laddering of the investments, and the primary goal is really to get the most interest that we can on the monies that we have available to us. So here's the strategies for the short term. And this is from tradingeconomics.com, so I've used this to show this graph. And this dotted line is really showing what the projections were. So you can see that the projections are at 2.7. And then the other line that is more of a laddered line, that's really what happened with the feds. So you can see it's pretty consistent with, their projections are pretty consistent with what's happened. And so I can look at a few different agencies. So right now I can look at U.S. government agencies at 2.5, 2.7. I can look at corporate bonds at 2.6 to 2.85, but I already mentioned that we get 2.5 on the money market. So it's just a balancing act right now to try to figure out when to move that money. Again, you have to make sure that the CDs can beat the money market rate. It's been very tough for investment firms to come out here and to beat that money market rate of Associated Bank. So I have invested, for June, I invested $20 million in other investments, and you've seen that in your monthly board report, but there's a lot less opportunities when the market is moving as quickly as it is. For the long term, again, I'm going to research opportunities to the future ladder these investments while considering the interest rate. And then if you look at, again, that same source for trading economics, the expectation is it would be 2.75 in 12 months' time. So we don't want to miss out on that. And so that really reduces us to looking at very short-term investments. And also, they're projecting that in the next year, that we will be up to 3.5% in 2020. So we don't want to have something tied up at 3.25 and then miss out on this bump that we could have. So I'm looking at very short-term opportunities right now that must beat the money market account. So reporting back, I do report this on our monthly investment report. So you see that, you see the activity month by month, and then the financial results. So you'll see the interest income on the line item, that's what it's called, interest income. You'll see that there. And then, of course, I'll report back with the quarterly treasurer's reports. Any questions?
Mr. Connor.
In terms of the grade of the corporate bonds, what's our range or our limit on that?
Most of them are very safe, AA. I have them listed in the treasurer's report and the actual report itself. Remember. Yeah, it's in a graph in there that I've pulled, so I wanted to make sure that you had that information also.
But AA is typically the target?
It's very safe. I have to pull the investment policy and the statute to be absolutely 100% sure, but it's very safe investments.
Okay. Ms. McCullough.
Tell me again, tell all of us, evidence-based funding. So it's up 1.5 million. Give me the definition and why is it up 1.5 million?
The state has allocated, it's a new funding formula basically that happened last year. So really, it was the old general state aid. So we really didn't know how much the state would allocate, and we didn't know if we would lose it somewhere else. So for the first year anyways, we've had a gain on CPPRT and on evidence-based funding. But I really used the low point when I was budgeting for the last 6 years and pulled what's the lowest increase that we received, and that was 6%. So we used that during our budgeting. So, you know, it was just a conservative method to use.
But there was also another bump that we received this year, wasn't there, that was outside of evidence-based? What was the other?
CPPRT, a corporate
No.
person.
Where's our CP? Where is that?
That went up $500,000.
Okay.
These are both.
And higher than budget.
These are both just higher than
Yeah.
budget. So you may be thinking about the total delta year over year, and we budgeted at
Right.
6%, but it came in that 1.5 million above the 6% we budgeted. You know, obviously, we're in a new legislative session right now, and we're going on projections, and again, we have to estimate based on where we think that will land.
Okay. And then the other question I have, because this, you know, investments and the like are not my forte, but I really do want to understand your laddering of investments. So it says time to maturity, but that bottom part of the scale, the 0 through 12, that is a monthly scale? Is that what that is?
That is a yearly scale.
So 0 years, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years?
That's correct.
Okay. It wasn't,
Yes.
I'm sorry if that was
yeah.
identified on there.
Yeah, ending years to final maturity, so it's really per year. So you're seeing a lot sitting in the 0 to 2 range, which isn't typically what you'd want to have happen, but in this rising interest rates, this is why it looks like that.
So that's the amount of money, the percentage of money that we have that is in a 2-year, I mean, for the peak is in a,
Yes.
we're locked in, right?
Well, we might not be locked in, but a lot of it's in the money market right now, but we are locked into some things at 2-year. We are locked into the 4-year, 6-year, 8-year. So we did have some laddering that was happening before my arrival here, and then I've just filled in the gaps. So I still have some gaps between year 10 and 12. You can see there's nothing there.
Right.
So typically you'd want to have something there, but with the interest rates rising like they are, we don't want to lock into things that are lower than what we think we're going to get in the future.
Right, or very far.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Michelle? Thank you. Great job. Mrs. Hoadley, you are up next with a board policy revision on facilities.
This is a proposed revision to Board Policy 8.20, which is the facilities use policy. It's a revision requested by administration to allow for free rentals to fundraising events such as tournaments that are hosted at the schools where the student groups receive a portion of the gate receipts or the concessions sold at the facilities.
Ms. McCullough?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering what the student group is getting a percentage, and then what, the organization that's sponsoring the event gets the rest of it? That would be correct. So can you give us some examples that are pushing us to make this change? What have we not been able to waive a fee on because?
I think the fundraiser that we're specifically looking to be able to do more of, and Dr. Vosburg might be able to help me on this one a little bit as well, but I think we're really looking to have the ability for a group of students. A lot of our students make money by working the concession stand, for example, at a home football game. Well, what we would like to be able to do more of is hosting an event at one of our gymnasiums or at one of our facilities, and having the students work the event, work the concessions, and then be able to keep the dollars from hosting that event.
So if a private organization came in and did a wrestling or we've had some, our facilities used for that, as long as we let the students do something that they can make money on it, could the gate receipts still all go to this private organizations and our students would just get some money because they worked a concession?
Right, so the way it would be structured is this would only be allowable if student groups are able to benefit from using the facility to bring that event. Yes, the other group could also, would also have the ability to draw a gate and other things, but a percentage would go to cover the costs of the custodial and things like that. The students would make a profit, and then whatever the group could make on top of that. So we'd cover kind of our maintenance costs, we would cover our students making money, but this would allow us to basically have groups take part of that. Dr. Vosberg, do you have something to add?
Some examples could be like basketball tournaments for youth tournaments at some of our field houses where students, as part of a basketball program, would help run the tournament and fundraise, as opposed to going door to door and selling candy bars or things like that. This is a win-win. We do cover the cost of custodial services and usage of the buildings as well.
So what if there's a basketball tournament that has private schools in the area included? No, I'm serious. We've been going around on this. Is that also?
Typically, that would not, we don't partner with those organizations. These are youth organizations that we typically partner with. These are not other school entities.
You know, I probably did concession stands in football. Whoever just said that the students work the football concession stands. I did that for probably 10 years through my 3 kids. I never saw a student in there with me. They were all parents. So that's a misnomer, whoever thinks that they're there.
Probably some truth to
I can
that.
tell you the students are really
Mr. Rollins.
I guess I'm looking for clarification now, because what I heard both Dr. Jarrett and Dr. Vosberg say is that our costs would be covered, but this is all under Category 1, which means that we're not charging any facility rental fees. So where exactly are we getting our costs covered? And I was just going to make the comment, talk about academic return on investment. So if we run a tournament that costs us $50,000 in facilities fees and our student group makes $5,000, we'd be better off just writing them a check.
Correct. I think what we can do is bring back a specific example before you make a decision. I'll be happy to have Mr. Parker come to our next meeting and walk through some specific examples. Essentially, what we would want to do is make sure that doesn't happen. I asked the same question. So we would want whatever custodial costs or wear and tear to be covered, and for an outside entity, allow the students to then work the facility so that it would qualify for Category 1. So we'll walk you through what this could look like, and if the board thinks this is something that makes sense for use of our facilities to help student groups, great. If not, we'll go back to the drawing board.
Who provides the security in such events? Does it depend? I mean, do we have to provide
That
the
would come out of
security?
the overhead of the organization that would be using it. Basically, the custodial overhead would have to be covered, and any real costs we would incur, and we would be waiving the rental fee for using the facilities, but we would not write a check out of our district. To Mr. Rollins' point, if we incurred $10,000 in custodial fees to let our students raise $2,000, that would be a bad investment. So we'll bring some specific examples to clarify.
Okay.
But it clearly states Category 1 groups are not charged facility rental fees, and the rental fees are what we charge to cover the use, the cleaning, the security, whatever. And so if you now name these as Category 1, and I was somebody that wanted to come in and do this and said, here's what your policy is, it doesn't match up. It doesn't tell, you can give me an example, but if it says here that they are not charged facility fees.
We'll work back with Mr. Parker. What we want to accomplish is, with the policy, is we want to have schools have the ability to use their facility to make money, but not have it cost the district money for them to make money. That's what we're trying to accomplish. That's the Venn diagram here. So we will keep working until we get it right.
Very good. Okay, Mrs. Neary, I think you're up next. Middle School English Language Arts.
Good evening. I don't have a full presentation for you because it is in your agenda, but we presented at the Committee of the Whole in January for the My Perspectives resource adoption for 6th through 8th grade English language arts. And so we're coming back tonight for further discussion because I know that some of the board members had some questions. Some of the questions were around data. Because with the data that I shared in the presentation showed the school conditional growth index from last year and this year, and one of the concerns was around even though Eisenhower made data or made growth in their data, that it might not have been as high as last year. And so what we're really trying to do tonight is answer some of those questions for you. An additional data point I wanted to share kind of in relationship to that is we looked at cohort data for Eisenhower. Just to kind of provide additional ways to look at this in terms of student growth, and we really tried to pull the percentile data from MAP. So our students that were in 6th grade last school year, they were at the 56th percentile in the winter MAP assessment. This year, as 7th graders, they're in the 62nd percentile, so they have increased in their achievement. Our students who were in 7th grade last year were at the 26th percentile, and this year they're in the 29th as 8th graders. And so we've seen achievement growth, or growth in their achievement on both of those cohorts of students. And so I wanted to share that information as well, because I know that's additional data that we didn't provide last time.
Okay. Ms. McCulloch had a question on that.
Yep. Yeah. What does that have to do with the pilot that was done this year?
So when we were looking at comparative data, we were looking at to show that using the pilot, and I want to clarify, it's not a pilot, it was an early adoption of the curriculum, but that the students grew. So when we look at where they are now compared to where they are last year, those same cohorts of students, they did grow, and we do have higher achievement level for them.
Okay. I do have a list of questions. I don't know if you want us to take turns and do one and one and one, or how you want to do that.
Mr. Rollins, you want to?
So
I guess I just want to get more clarification on that. I understand they grew, but let's take your example. The 6th grade cohort last year, conditional growth index was 2.9.
Right.
7th grade cohort, their conditional growth index was 1.97. So they grew, but they grew less. 7th grade cohort, 2.7 last year, 1.3 in 2019. So I understand they grew, but they grew less under the pilot program than under the previous year when they were using a different resource.
Well, so we've changed 3 things for our teachers this year at Eisenhower, and we have some of those teachers here tonight, as well as our principal, who are ready to share some of their stories and things that they've seen this year. But we changed 3 things for them. The first is a new curriculum, which is the scope and sequence and the essential learning outcomes and learning targets that the curriculum leadership team has created over the last 3 years. The second is, with that curriculum, it's taught in a blocked class, and so instead of having a separate English and reading class, those are put together to be taught on a 100-minute block. And so our teachers are learning how to do that. And then in order to teach this new curriculum, we've provided them with a new resource, which provides different texts for the students to read, and rigorous texts at grade level to really make sure that our students are all receiving that grade level instruction in English and grade level text to attack and to read closely as they move forward. So those are 3 things that we have changed for them, and so it's really not. The resource is a resource to help teach the curriculum. And so the new curriculum really calls for changes in instruction, which is where we really want to focus our time this summer, not only on the Institute Day that we're going to have on May 3rd, to kind of give teachers a preview and also start training them in how to begin these instructional shifts. But I've also started talking to middle school principals about how we can begin some training in the summer, and then of course using our Institute Days. We have 2 Institute Days in the fall that we'll be using to train teachers really around the instructional shifts and the differentiation of what needs to take place in a blocked class in order to teach this new curriculum. The resource helps them teach the new curriculum, but the resource is not the curriculum. We don't follow it page, by page, and it's not a scripted program. So it's different than like Reading Horizon that we adopted for foundational literacy, which is more of a scripted program.
Ms. McCulloch?
So as a board member, I'd like to talk about process of bringing in new resources and curriculum and block and all that. And you're saying you're not piloting. We always called this in the past piloting when we brought in a new resource and teachers used it, or, you know. And you're saying it's early adoption versus piloting, meaning...
So what we did here, in terms of, when we had done pilots in the past, we had usually piloted 2 different resources and then compared the data from both. And so we did not do that process here. The CLT, the Curriculum Leadership Team, selected My Perspectives as the resource that best aligned to the instructional shifts and the essential learning outcomes in the curriculum. For this school year, Eisenhower and Kennedy elected to early adopt the blocked curriculum and to begin the process of teaching our students in that way in order to enhance the curriculum before full implementation across the district next year. And so we're learning a lot from them. And those teachers, some of them are on the curriculum leadership team, and then some of them are and then the others that are not are using the curriculum leadership team members to bring that feedback back to the team as they're making tweaks this year before full rollout next year.
So, from a process standpoint, there were so many confounding factors, like you already said. You had block, you had curriculum, and you had resource. So you can't really tell which of the 3 prevented you from making the same achievements that you did last year. You talked about implementation dip. Well, any pilot would have an implementation dip. Nobody's really talked about. I would like to know if we as a district can have a better process and more continuity in how we pilot, because I'm going to call it piloting, new resources. It just seems to me there were so many factors, and then there's the Kennedy piece, and they had substitute teachers, and so there were all these, I'm going to use the word excuses, for why we weren't successful or as successful moving achievement in these students in these areas because all these other pieces. So why did we even do it? I guess because we found out that we didn't want the online one and we wanted the soft copy that everybody had. So there was a learning curve on that. I don't know what else we learned from it. I just would like to know how because we need to be processed. I'm not questioning the choice because you guys have that educational expertise to look at the material and say it aligns with the curriculum piece, but putting all the pieces together at once in a early adoption / pilot, we can't tell what was limiting. So is there a way we could do this from and I know Heidi's not here, you're kind of stepping in for her, but is there a way we could look at doing that as a district instead of, we went to PDSA when you're bringing things forward. When we were on Ed Committee, we had a clear set of questions and expectations on each resource adoption and the whole piloting. But now this is so different.
Well, and we're actually, we're still using the same process that we used last year and that we used this year for the other adoptions that have already been approved in terms of our CLT process and our curriculum leadership team. This team chose to early adopt into schools. That was really the recommendation of the curriculum leadership team. In order to, instead of adopting district-wide, first they chose to, the teachers really wanted to say, we want a couple of our schools to begin this work, and then use their information and their feedback, the teachers, to be able to tweak pieces of the curriculum before a full district rollout. And this has given us the opportunity to do that.
And the schools that were chosen because?
Kennedy was chosen because they already had a block because of their adjusted schedule. And then Eisenhower was chosen because their principal and their teachers all agreed to be an early adoption school. And Kennedy agreed as well, but they already had a block in their day for ELA. And so that is how the two were chosen.
But the staffing issue really did impact what you were doing, and so I think that needed to be considered. So I had a conversation with legal about block scheduling, and our contract basically says we can't block schedule. So we're doing a workaround on that how so that we can do it district-wide is my next question.
Let me jump in on that. Legal did not say we cannot do block scheduling. We would have to negotiate with the REA to have the ability to have someone have an unbalanced schedule where they would teach 6 in one semester and 1 4, but we would have the ability right now for someone to have 4/5 of their schedule be a block. So there has to be a split class workaround right now where one teacher would teach one half of the class and the other teacher would teach the other half of the class. I think there also would be the opportunity where I suppose you could have somebody do a 6th assignment if that's the way the schedule fell, that would allow you to even that out. So there are things we can legally do within the constraints of the contract. And I think there's opportunity, if this works well, and if teachers are open to the idea of having that conversation about teaching 4 one semester and 6 another semester, that would be another potential solution as well, because they would still teach 10 sections over the course of the year. But for now, I think we're committed to the workaround of teaching 5 and 5 and doing some pairing up.
And my concern is mostly that, so Eisenhower, thank you for stepping up and saying we're willing to try this, but if there's pushback from the other middle schools because it is not within the contract to have, and true block scheduling doesn't happen every day, right? It's like certain days of the week.
We're not
you have
talking
that.
about full block.
So it's not
We're
really
only talking
block.
Blocking one class.
It's an ELA block. That's called an ELA block, what we're doing. It's only the ELA class.
And so we don't have to have a memorandum of understanding to do this. Is that correct?
To do blocks, to block ELA classes, no, but it creates an even number of classes and teachers teach an odd number of classes. So if a typical teacher has 5 50-minute periods, what happens here is the math doesn't work in an even way because they would have 2 100-minute periods, and then they would need an additional 50-minute period. So the workaround would be, depending on how the schedule fell, there's the possibility of a sixth assignment to even that out, or there's a split class option. Those are the only 2 options that are currently available to us. I think it would be reasonable over time to have a collaborative discussion about allowing some flexibility on unbalanced scheduling, but that is not something we've discussed at this point formally. Dr. Bosberg?
Well, I just wanted to add, the other middle schools are expecting to do this. They've already began building their master schedules around this. Obviously, it is, like you said, Mrs. McCullough, there's 2 big shifts here, new curriculum adoption and the block scheduling. So there's a lot of work to be done there, but it has been in conversation for over a year, probably 2 years. And although on the surface, the data did go backwards a little bit, the actual results are above what they would be on the scorecard as far as what we need schools to do. So it's more than 60% of the students are meeting their growth goals, and it's more than 0.5 CGI. So in the first half of this year, under that implementation, they would still meet the expectations on our scorecard for growth for students. Again, all principals are planning to do this next year, and we do have to work out some technicalities. One thing to add about the blocking and the odd number, you could split a block, which I think is happening at Eisenhower, and some other schools a teacher may teach 2 blocks, which is technically 4 classes, and then a different singleton, like a Read 180 or System 44 or something like that. So there are ways to get around it, and we can still work with the REA to maybe get a teacher to do 3 blocks, or 3 and then 2 has been discussed as well.
Mrs. Holby, I'm just confirming, because when I say legal, I talk, that all that is within, everything that we're talking about is all within the constraints of the current contract.
Correct.
Yes, so there's no issues with that. Okay. In here it defines selective, doesn't it define selective classes? I mean, this is all students in the middle school, right?
Correct.
It's going to be at every level.
Yes.
Including, for example, our bilingual students, and we did not do any piloting, early adoption with any bilingual students. Is part of this purchase alternative, resources in Spanish?
So there are not Spanish resources. What I've worked with the bilingual department on is actually the students in the bilingual program will use the English resource for that class, and then they will receive their instruction in Spanish in other classes.
So that they get their percentage of the day.
Correct.
Got it. I know the other group that we, and I had sent you a note, was asking about special programs, which would be our,
Montessori, Marshall, and Barber. Those are our three.
And Haskell, I asked you about that as well, the STEM program. No, that's middle, not middle school,
elementary.
elementary.
Yes.
And you stated back to me that none of those programs will be using it because they're developing their own they're still in the development of strategic
No,
plans.
they're working through their strategic plan, and so curriculum is part of that. So with this initial purchase, they are not included. Currently, right now, Marshall is undergoing a resource evaluation for ELA. They're starting that process. Now, they could select this resource. They're going to review this one, but they're also reviewing other resources that might fit, the needs of the gifted students at Marshall. So they're undergoing kind of their own resource adoption process right now. Barber and Montessori are not undergoing that yet, but they could choose to, as they go through that process, they could choose to use this same resource if it fits their needs of their special program, or they might choose a different resource to meet the needs of their special program.
And when is that process happening at Montessori and at
I can't speak to
Barber?
that would be Dr. Heather Saltis, who could speak
And
to that.
what about the whole, Dr. Jared, could you just speak to the whole strategic plan for special programs that we've been hearing is in the process for the last 3 years? Where are we at with all those plans?
I'm happy to have Dr. Saltis come and present. She's presented in the weekly update on a regular basis, so we'd be happy to share that. I could certainly turn it over to anybody else, since she's not here. Would anybody else want to add anything?
How long does it take to come up with a strategic plan?
They have a plan.
Yeah, they have a plan.
They're implementing the plan. So we can give you updates on where they're at implementation-wise, if you'd like.
So choosing they'll be using your same curriculum that the CLT came up with?
Not necessarily. They might do some differentiation as to fit the needs of their special program. They'll start with the core curriculum and then differentiate as they need to. So in their, and I can't speak to their strategic plan, but in their strategic plan, they have goals around curriculum alignment, and so they're working on those goals at this time.
And I will cede the floor to you after this one, and that is some of the complaints that we had from parents, because this is in my sub-district, was about utilizing the online piece of it. I know you went to the other. Did you have a lot of positives from parents? And I want to give you an opportunity, since you're here, from parents and students about the resource. Thank you.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, I haven't had a comment about the resource from a parent that has come to me and talked about it. The biggest concern parents have talked to me about are the split blocks. The actual curriculum resource, nobody has addressed that with me, positive or negative.
What's their concern about the split block?
You have two teachers. when you have a full block, you have one teacher teaching the 100-minute block. And when you have to split that block between two different teachers, that communication has to be perfect. They're leaving off basically a 100-minute block in the middle, and then they're transitioning to another teacher. So that transition can be very difficult for some of the teachers. Some of the teachers have very, very good communication. It works really well. Other teachers, it struggles a little bit. So it's not an ideal scenario, as Dr. Jarrett was mentioning, with even number of blocks that we want to have, odd number of classes teachers need to teach. So that's kind of the biggest concern that I've heard from parents. Nothing about the actual resource, though.
Mr. Connor?
Well, first, thank you for being here. Absolutely. Much appreciated. I know it's always scintillating to sit through a board meeting, but in spite of that,
And there will be school tomorrow, so.
And there will be school tomorrow, that's right. Yeah. So two things. One is, I'm glad you did lay out the lagging and leading indicators. My only comment is, it was kind of amusing to see essentially the same one in both for the growth. It said 60% is meeting in one, and the other said meeting or exceeding. So I think the one advice on the metrics side would be that, I think you might want to look more closely at the differentiation between the leading and lagging, because it was really kind of the same thing. The other is that on, I think it's page 6, you had you had study 1, study 2, and study 3, and clearly what you're saying is that you want to use that model, which was the study 3, which intervention replaces elective. Is that not correct?
Which document are you referring to?
I'm sorry, I'm on the 6 through 8 ELA course structure.
Oh, the task force proposal. Okay, I was looking at the PDSA on page 6, and I don't know.
Well,
which one you're
there's
referring to.
actually a couple versions of this, but this was the latest version that came out. And that's where the other was from that same thing.
From that same.
Yeah, and on this one, so in effect, and if you look at the numbers, study 3, generally speaking, is a little bit more, although number 2, which is clearly what it indicates what we do now, the numbers seem to be still better than the first. But I'm assuming that the tenor of this is that we are, to be clear, not giving kids really, or we're taking one elective away from them to be able to do this, was the upshot I got.
If we're not taking an elective away to do the block, except for our 8th grade honors students, because currently our 8th grade honors students right now only have a 50-minute class period, which really doesn't provide them enough time to go deep into the standards. And so with the new block, they're going to a 100-minute period. They had an extra elective, so we're not taking away one that they would normally have. They had an extra one for that. For our students who might need intervention, that's where the elective their elective offerings might decrease. Because that's what you're referring to. Yes.
Yeah, this section is reading intervention as an additional course, so.
Yes.
Sorry,
that one would
that's
need
the section I was in.
Yes, and I realized I didn't print it, so I was going to pull it up on
That's
the
right,
computer.
but my only point is that because it's reading intervention, so in a sense, we should be able to see that this makes a difference, and that's part of the metrics.
Correct.
That's why I kind of pointed out you had the one that sounded like, it'd almost be nice to know, the impact on kids that really do need that intervention.
That additional support.
And that, right, so that somewhere in leading and lagging, you've got to measure, they started here and they ended up here because of that intervention, even though, because I presume you're going to sell it like, hey, you have one less free course or elective course, but you really need this, and here's why, and then show that success. I hate to obsess on metrics, but that was clearly what I got out of that one.
Great. No, thank you for the feedback.
Go ahead, Ms. McCulloch.
No.
Mr. Rollins?
Oh, I was just going to say, my reluctance, I guess, is that it's a bad time for us to be doing something district-wide that results in implementation dips, which is the explanation for what happened last year, right? So I am going to ask you in simple terms whether you think you know exactly why you saw those implementation dips, and whether you are going to be able to prevent those implementation dips as this is implemented district-wide. We are all focused on trying to increase student achievement, and if you're asking us to approve something that in its pilot program resulted in an implementation dip, I struggle with that, I really do.
So I cannot pinpoint the one thing that caused the implementation dip. What I can say is that what we're learning is that our teachers need additional support in how to teach on the block and how to differentiate for all of their students that are in their classrooms. And so that is where we want to put our focus this summer, to really help our teachers be prepared to teach in this new way next school year.
So I'm just going to add a comment, and that is that when we all get real smart about academic return on investment, a year or two from now, we'll be able to have you answer questions like, what's the expected growth or increase in achievement? How many students are affected by what you're going to do? And what's the cost?
You were really paying attention.
Okay. Yeah, right. And so I'm just warning you to be prepared that we're going to start asking those questions about, okay, how many, this is a middle school, so how many programs, so how many students is that? What's your expected growth, and what is it cost? Not at total cost, not just to buy the stuff to train the teachers, to implement, to do all that stuff. So that's coming, okay? All right. Ms. McCullough, did you have another comment?
Actually, you were kind enough to be here, the teachers especially, who had an opportunity to put this, in use with the students, and I didn't know if any of you might have a comment you want to make.
Yeah, I think that'd be
A comment
great.
about maybe the implementation piece, a comment about anything students have said to you, or, just give us a little bit of feedback, because that's why you came, so thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us. I'm Erin Zalaki, and I'm a sixth grade teacher at Eisenhower. And we're really excited about this resource. I'm also on the CLT team. I've been on this is my fourth year.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a while, so it's been a long road. We're just really excited because one of the things, and I think teachers are leery about, is doing the reading and writing together. Because before it was one reading teacher and a writing teacher. For me, this is my 14th year in the district, I've always did the reading. So now I'm like, oh gosh, now I gotta do the writing. This resource, it combines the reading and writing together. And it's a good component to help teachers teach the reading and writing together. The other thing is the students, it's a routine. They like the online, they like the actually writing on, like annotating on the consumable part. We just printed out this year because we don't have the consumable. And the biggest for our PDSA with the student feedback is they can annotate, and they can also do the online. One of the other things I really am excited about this for, is it the IR? Not park anymore, it's IR. Yeah, I still call it park.
There you go.
The online testing and essay sets them up to be successful for this test. The biggest problem that I've seen in the past is with some of the other resources that we found, some of the questions were confusing to students. So when they go on to these state tests or MAP tests, they're confused about the question. So with this new online testing and essay score, it sets them up to be successful. And the students really like the essay component. For an example, and if I'm talking too much, just let me know. In the unit, for Unit 3, we're focused on argumentative writing. And we have an essential question: is technology harmful or helpful? So we have different genres that we read, we collect our evidence, and we have mini writing throughout. And then the end essays, they have to find all their evidence and complete an essay. And there's like 6 stars, so once they start typing, they click feedback, and it gives them immediate feedback. You have too many run-on sentences, capitalization. So they go back and they edit right then and there. And so that helps them to buy into their learning and what they're submitting to us. So those are some of the key factors that I know we're excited about. And the other thing too is collaboration amongst, I know I'm on the 6th grade team, there's 5 of us that we meet every Tuesday and we're on the same page. So let's say a student moves from my class to a different teacher, we're all on the same page. And it's really nice to finally work and be collaborative for that part. So.
Thanks. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I just want to clarify one more thing about the implementation dip, because I know we're nervous about that. And I want everybody to just kind of keep in mind that there's 3 different types of challenges that we took on this year. The new curriculum, the resource, and the block scheduling. All of those together created that implementation dip. So I don't want the Pearson resources just to be viewed as the one cause that could have been seen as why the scores weren't quite as good as last year. And to speak to the scores last year, our scores last year were awesome last year. I mean, we're in the 99th percentile for growth nationwide. So you can't necessarily even expect that we wouldn't even not have made that growth 2 years in a row. That's hard to get 1 year in a row. To get 2 years in a row is very difficult. So
that was for growth, though, not...
That's growth.
That wasn't where you align with national or state.
No, that's growth for all. Everybody took MAP. So we're in the 99th percentile for growth for the MAP assessments. So to equal that and to meet that would be a feat in itself. Regardless of where we were this year, we still had amazing growth, even with these 3 challenges. So again, I just don't want a decision to be made on curricular resource with just taking that curricular resource into mind. It was a new curriculum, the resource that we're using, and again, the implementation of a block schedule, which is very different than what we were doing in the past. So.
Okay.
Teachers?
Okay.
Thank you
Okay, thank you for being here.
Thank you for stepping up. Yes.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you.
We'll move on to then Mr. Zediker and the Insight Workforce Solution. Or subs.
Yeah, thank you. We brought this issue back for new business for the board. I have brought Joe Kelly and Andrew Walter back from Insight. We won't be re-presenting information because I've heard on more than one occasion that it was a little lengthy. Really? And so I won't be making that same mistake. But we have seen and heard some feedback in terms from the board about not having the ability to really digest, ask questions, and so we wanted to make sure that we brought this back to really have that opportunity for a conversation, as well as an update in terms of our contract, working with outside counsel and working with counsel with Insight, adapting the contract with some revisions that were identified as potentially problematic. So those issues have been ironed out. And so we wanted to make sure that we're getting back in front of the board to address any questions or concerns the board may have with potentially moving forward with Insight to outsource our teachers and paraprofessionals for substitutes. So with that, I'll open it up to the board.
Can you just highlight some of those contract issues were? The one that I heard was about workers' comp. There was a question about that.
Yep, so there was, and I won't begin to be able to speak in terms of legal terms, but...
Just kind of hit the highlights here.
So there was some concern about, I think, level insurance, what we expected out of our substitutes in terms of would they be able to oversee more than one class. So there were some content issues, and then there were some legal issues in terms of being sole provider. With the termination of the contract was an issue, and so we worked through the ability on both parties to have a termination clause in there without reason, with an adequate time limit. So those types of things were addressed both with our outside counsel and their counsel to alleviate some of those issues.
Okay. Mr. Escobedo, you can go first.
Yeah, I've got a quick question for administration. And I've been having a hard time with this one as well, and I think I finally got to the bottom of why I'm having a hard time with this. What is an optimal and acceptable rate of, whether it's by year, whether it's by month, because it may vary during winter or during holidays, for example?
Sure. If you're asking me what optimal is, it would be 100%. Because if we're going to have a vacancy, I would like to have that filled. That would be pie in the sky. We currently sit at 79% for our teacher fill vacancy rate. We'd much rather see that in the mid to high 80s consistently, because that tells us then we are really filling at a pretty good rate. But to answer your question, ideally it's 100%.
Because one of the things I'm struggling with, okay, if you know what the optimal rate is, we understand you can't hit 100, right? But there's got to be a healthy percentage of a rate that's acceptable. And then once you know that, how is that baked into the contract? So there's automatic, whether it's notifications or stopgap, so that we don't, so that this doesn't just become a free-all type of, something that we do and just because it's managed by someone else that we forget about. And so that's what I'm trying to understand. How do we bake that into the contract so it's automatic and not depending on people to be monitoring it?
In terms of the number of vacancies that are created, or how we go about filling those vacancies?
I would say the number, that the percentage, let's say this one of my concerns is that this will become, say, free-for-all, and we'll forget about what the fill rate is, and all of a sudden we're, getting more and more vacancies because it's becoming very easily to...
Right. Yep. So I think this goes back to earlier discussion in terms of kind of a two-pronged approach. Number one, it's working with our schools and our principals with some of the strategies that we are starting to put in place to be proactive and address teacher vacancies in terms of having teachers having to call their principal to identify when they're going to be gone, not just log on to a system, because we know it's certainly easier just to log onto a system to say I'm going to be gone. So there is still going to have to be a schools approach. Some of the things that we've done from schools is Dr. Vosberg working with those principals, but we've also incentivized schools in terms of the dollars allocated to them for their vacancies. And so what we're working on is allocating those dollars, and if they don't utilize those dollars, then they can utilize those dollars for other pieces in their school, whether that's technology purchases or other types of things. So that's the school piece to it. In terms of what the Insight piece would be to it, there is going to be monthly reports because that's going to be part of the billing structure. So we're going to be able to see school by school, where are our vacancies, how are they being filled, both from a district perspective, but also by a school perspective. Because we may increase the overall fill rate of the district up to 85 to 89%, but we still may have two schools that are down in the 50% fill. And why is that? And so those will be types of the data and analytics that Insight will provide to me and my team so that I can share with Dr. Vosberg and the schools team to find out if there's a deeper issue with particular schools. But it will be attacked from kind of a two-pronged approach.
Okay, and then I'm just going to make a general comment. This is not in, so we are outsourcing what's kind of, we've talked about district management group. We're now talking about outsourcing, we're talking about outsourcing key components that are part of our core services, educational, that touch our student. That's kind of concerning to me. I have no problem considering other items, whether it's IT or other services that are not necessarily indirect service for our students. I'll just make that for the board as a general comment that we got to keep that in mind. We are talking about outsourcing our core business, our key core services to our students that directly impact our students. Just keep that in mind.
And if I can, Mr. Escobedo, we do that already. We outsource speech path when we can't find them. We outsource other positions when we can't find permanent employees that interact with our kids. So this is larger in terms of a larger scale, but this is not new. We do that currently in our organization to make sure that we can get qualified people in front of our students. So I certainly understand your comment, but this is just a larger scale of things that we already do as an organization.
Who's next? Mr. Dixon, you want to go next?
Sure, thank you. He's not alone with the concerns about that, because I guess my biggest concern is where are we going to find these teachers that that you said you're going to find, and maybe it's just that easy. What you say, one response was you said we're going to have a sign out saying we had, a parade or something. And maybe we're going to find, maybe it's just that simple that we just didn't. A football game. It's going, and so that was my concern. And then is if we that live here, and you're new to this area, we that live here are having difficulty finding teachers, well, how are you going to find them? Because this is our neighborhood. And then my other thing is, what are the ways that you want to pick or fill the schools? Because we have a school on the west side, we have a school on the east side. They both need to be filled. You only have one teacher. How do we choose what gets filled?
So to answer your first question, I really break it down into three components for recruiting, and we'll also talk about retention as well. It's just as important as recruiting, but the first component would be your current staff. So your current staff, there's a concern with the Affordable Care Act that if somebody works 5 days a week, there could be a health care expense related to that individual. Working with our organization, we can put a permanent substitute in place, so 176 days. A current employee now that works for the school district now works for Insight for the entire school year, where you won't have that health care cost. So the capacity on that individual we can increase from, say, 4 out of 5 days to now 5 out of 5 days. So effectively increasing that pool by 20%.
Okay.
The other piece would be your retirees.
Right.
So your retired teachers are now capped at 120 they can work in a school year. That will reduce down to 100 in 2 years, 100 days that they can work in the entire school year. We can work those individuals for the 176 days or whatever the calendar year will be at the next school year coming. So those individuals or retirees can work more often as well. So the capacity on those individuals has been extended out as well. And then you look at recruiting in the marketplace. One is people that are looking for a substitute job. So it's going to be a teacher, an educator, a substitute, somebody that knows education that's related to it. Those individuals that are actively seeking those positions, we're going to go out and recruit for those individuals online, Facebook, social media, SEO, Google marketing, remarketing. We want to make sure that we have the presence out there in the community as well to recruit those individuals, but they're actively looking individuals. They could come to a principal, they could come to the building here. We're going to get our branding out in the buildings and signs and just make sure that we're noticed and we're public and people are aware of our program. So that's the people that are looking for jobs. The whole other piece of this is individuals that aren't looking for a substitute position, that aren't looking at working in Rockford or aren't looking at working with Insight. And we want to go out and recruit those types of individuals. New legislation has passed, which has allowed or reduced the requirement for a substitute from a bachelor degree individual to now 60 college credits or an associate's degree. So there's about 350,000 people in the metro area. About 30% of them qualify into that associate's degree or 60 college credits or higher. So we want to focus on those individuals that are at a football game, or maybe they're going to a back-to-school night, or an event, a parade with the community. Those types of individuals, from what we have found and what I have found over the 10 years of being in this business, are people that care about their schools and their kids. They care about their communities. So if they can look at this almost like a vocation where they're also going to get paid, and then we can provide them the professional development to be a substitute teacher for that single day, they're great employees for us. And they're that stopgap. They're going to fill that void that we have now from the 77%, 79%, hopefully up to 85, hopefully up to 90 the following year, and 95 the following year after that. So it's a growth. It's not snap our fingers and tomorrow we'll have a 99% fill rate. The other piece of this as well is when people come into our program, that educator, we want them to see opportunity. The light at the end of the tunnel is for them to get out of our program. So we want those individuals to move through our program. And we'll also look back to the district and teachers and other substitutes and offer referrals. So we spend a ton of time, money, and energy trying to recruit individuals in our program, but if we can put those monies in the pockets of our employees, your current subs, or maybe the teaching staff, that can build that trust and credibility with those individuals and, put some dollar bills in their pockets. I forget the second part of your question.
Mm-hmm. Choosing which school.
Sure. So we're going to identify through data and metrics where the deficiencies are, one school versus another school, or all the locations, and trying to identify what schools operate at a higher fill rate level and then those that operate at a lower fill rate. We can put those permanent substitutes in place and assign them to that building to work the entire school year. And let's say that a building A is at a 90% fill rate and building B is at a 70% fill rate, and they miss 5 jobs a day or average 5 missed opportunities a day. We can put a permanent substitute in that position to fill those 5 missed opportunities every day. So the goal would be, look at the data, let the information that is out there that resides within your ASOP system to tell us where we should allocate our resources, and then identify those individuals that can fill those gaps within those buildings.
Okay. Mr. Siegel?
So you're already pretty close on your teacher fill rate, your sub-teacher fill rate. You're figuring 21 points from optimal for you're at 79%. And the realistic was 85 to 89, so you're pretty close on that. I think your biggest challenge is going to be in the sub-paras. And I asked the question earlier tonight, and Mr. Zediker answered that our sub-fill rate for the paras is around 15%. So what is that in actual numbers of of positions that get filled?
I have that.
Okay. I don't have that actual data with me. I just had the percentage.
it's just off memory, it's like 8,800 positions were requested within a year, and 1,400 of those were filled.
Okay.
So our goal initially would be to fill about 30%. So there would be an initial pop, but that would be through giving us enough lead time, which I think we have now, to build up that substitute para pool, and then increase that fill rate by, 15%. And that's just really would be identifying individuals that want to work every day, that are from the community or close by, that we can put in these positions and give them the training to be that daily substitute on a para capacity.
So I understand the appeal of being able to work 5 days instead of 4, 3, or 2, or 1, and being able to qualify for, not to conflate terms, but qualify for affordable care. But it looks like still your challenge is going to end up being finding people who are going to work for that $75.08 a day, because this is going to be based on an 8-hour workday. Is that correct?
Typically, it's 6.5 to 7 hours.
Okay. So, but that's also going to include the fee we're going to pay to Insight, which I believe at the committee of the whole meeting was about 30%. So if they're going to be sitting at around $12 an hour for the actual, what we pay, they're going to get 70% of that. So whatever. I was an English major. Is that really going to end up being a super compelling draw to that pool of people, that they're going to be able to now acquire health care through their employer, when odds are, if they went ahead and just worked the 4 days and got paid what they paid, their insurance through the ACA is going to end up costing them nothing. It'll all be just subsidy down to nothing. So is that really going to be a benefit to those employees?
So not to get too technical. But
please do.
Yeah, so those employees that work for us, they're considered part-time employees, whether it's a sub working the full entire school year or a paraprofessional working the full entire school year. So they'll still have that opportunity to apply for Affordable Care Act through the Affordable Care Act exchange.
You as an employer offer insurance?
So if you take a 12-month measurement period, which a school district has to operate in a 10-month measurement period because of the way your operating calendar works, we can use the 12 months to offset our hours, so we can take the months of July and August and a little bit of June to take those 12 months, and we can get the individuals to average less than 30 hours per week. Therefore, they wouldn't qualify as a full-time employee for our organization, but we do offer them health care in the event they wanted health care.
And for...
So they could file for the they could get onto the exchange for the Affordable Care Act and still receive those subsidies down to, whatever that number would be. They could file also for unemployment with our organization because they're not a designated 10-month employee like they would be with the school district. So there are additional opportunities that they would get with our organization that they currently, wouldn't get with the school district.
Mr. Connor?
Is he done?
I think he was done. He was thinking.
Okay.
We'll come back if necessary.
Okay.
Okay. Number one, and I should have said this about the DMG group, the question I asked at Committee of the Whole was around experience. And it seems like the approach, even though it's just starting in Illinois, had been used elsewhere successfully. So that was one thing. And the same with DMG. I mean, these approaches, it's not like we're guinea pigs for this. This is really something that's been done. And while I appreciate what Mr. Escobedo said, one of the things I always say is, I think, and I always like kind of honesty, and the school district, the administration has been pretty honest. And the last big thing was, hey, we really haven't done such a good job on some of these things, we need outside help. Really. This one seems to me that, and it's not a criticism as such, but I think the nature of the beast is that subs are not our focus. I think that has been a system, if you will, that really has not worked for a while. And so, this again is us looking at doing things differently. And I think it is appropriate if somebody takes this on, and yes, there's going to be a cost, and there's some mechanical numbers here I'd be curious about knowing about, but the fact is that somebody, meaning this organization, Insight, is putting themselves on the hook to find people for us. Because if they don't, why would we renew a contract? I mean, that's just standard business. And the fact is, from the actual supply side, the fact that they have a lot of things covered that really we as a school district don't. I think there's a lot more to offer, and so yes, there's going to be challenges in finding people. We know that, but we've already got that times 10. And the fact that somebody does this, frankly, as their main focus, from my point of view, that's why I kind of like this approach, is that we do have somebody who, this is how they make their money. And so there's incentive for them to do this, and there's incentive from my point of view that's something we haven't been successful at. And I think the other thing is that when you look at what problems we're trying to solve, and I sent a note off to the administration, so I'm just saying what I told them. We have two, I think, problems. And I think this approach does more for one than the other, is that when you have what I call incidental, which is not a good term, meaning somebody calls up, they're going to be gone, whatever, you really have a pool that can respond to that much better than the mechanisms we have today. That one, I think, is a slam dunk. That one is just a no question. If you've got people who know to go to somebody, they will fill that, and I have, that's part I have utmost confidence in. I think the part where there are some questions that I want to articulate from my point of view is, I think we have some structural issues. So I totally hear the concern. This group, Insight, no offense, is not going to solve the issue if we've got structural problems at a school where we don't have enough teachers and things aren't being covered. Now, I appreciate the approach that says, hey, we could get a substitute for a year, but that's really kind of wallpapering the problem. So I think my expectation is that the incidental part will be covered, and that one seems to be pretty well. But I think we have a larger discussion as a school district board to say, what do we do about schools where full-time teachers are really the issue, and we don't want to have subs in there. To me, that is a bit separate discussion that we need to have outside of this. But if we can, if the old saying goes, staunch the bleeding right now and fill that part, I will be happy.
Okay. Mrs. McCullough.
So you're looking, I'm sure, to partner with other districts in this area now that the state has made this change and changed the rules. And so you've got a pool of people and you've got a geographic area and you've got a certain number of people. How do we know, how are we the priority?
Sure. So when we work with an organization or a school district, we set up certain metrics that we need to meet or exceed to fill the need. So the first metric is fill rate. And if you're not at acceptable fill rate, then we have to look at other ways to get to that acceptable fill rate. So one of those ways would be to build a substitute pool. And we have a metric that we believe we need to get to, how many subs working to get to that fill rate. So the first thing we look at is how many are actively working, and you have probably 200, 250 subs that are actively working. We think we need to probably add another 400 plus to that number. So we're going to work on building that pool here. So when we're recruiting for your district. I'm not recruiting for another organization or school district here because it just doesn't make sense. It's kind of like, if you're going to work at the 7-Eleven, you're going to work at the 7-Eleven in your town. You're not going to work at the 7-Eleven 7 towns over.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about Harlem and Belvedere that are all within a close drive. If somebody signs up with you and says, I'll sub at Belvedere, I'll sub at Harlem, I'll sub at Rockford, how do we know we're the priority so that we have the greatest fill rate?
So we believe we need 3.5 working subs for every 1 absence. So if you average 10 absences, that's 35 working subs. 100 absences, that's 350 working subs. 200, that's 700 working subs. Those working subs aren't an everyday worker. They could, and substitutes are free agents. So we believe that metric of hitting that 700 or whatever that number would be, once we kind of really dive into the numbers, if we're at that metric, then your fill rate should be sustained or meet that expectation.
Answer this question. Somebody, you've just said it, they're a free agent, so when they come to you and sign up and say you do get a contract with Harlem or Belvedere, we'll just say, there's nothing to say that we would be a priority. They would be in your same pool. You don't just have a pool for Rockford, correct?
No, we do.
In other states, you just have a pool for one single school district.
Yes, we build, so the way that the system works is you have an ASAP system, or a frontline absence management system. Within that system resides your substitutes. So when we hire, we're putting substitutes into your ASAP system. So we're trying to get that pool inflated to the number that we believe it needs to be at. Just, how the system currently works, you may have subs that work here and you may have subs that work in other school districts.
We do.
We can't stop a substitute from working in other places, but when we're here and we're recruiting, we're only recruiting for your school district.
Totally get that, but you get a call out on the same day for teachers because there's need in both districts. How do we know we get them?
Yeah, I think this is a great topic to talk about because it's one of the biggest misconceptions of substitute staffing is the migration patterns of substitutes. So we've heard this from over 300 districts that we've worked with, either at Insight or another staffing provider that Joe and I both worked at. And the biggest misconception is substitutes are kind of sharing the pool. They're going to Belvedere or Harlem or Rockford each day. They're trying to choose where they may go. So we did a measurement over 300 school districts because we have the data to do that with. And what we recognized is that 85% of substitutes that work for a school district come from the towns that send to that school district. We also looked at the migration pattern of 300 districts and what was the average number of districts that a substitute worked in, and it was 1.2, meaning that they weren't working in many districts. We then drilled down and we looked at a county-based program where there were 3 school districts in a county that were all neighboring districts. And we said, well, there must be a higher migration pattern there because all 3 districts kind of touch or neighbor to each other. And we would expect to see that number was higher than 1.2. It was actually less than that. It was 1.11. So the migration pattern, I understand your concern of migration pattern and where are they going and are we going to share with them. But what we found is that most substitutes are not getting in the car and driving 20 and 30 miles or 15 to 20 minutes when they have a building that is 10 or 15 minutes or 5 or 10 minutes from their home. Some of the statistics that we broadcast to folks is if you want to work less than 5 minutes from your home, you may want to consider being a substitute teacher. So I understand your concern. The data tells us that there's not a migration pattern that is as great as that. Where we have seen some level of migration is when there's disparating pay rates. So meaning that $20 to $30 more is paid in one district over another. And certainly if we're seeing those migration concerns, we're going to come back to the district and we're going to explain that there is a migration concern with another district and we may want to look at the pay rates that you're currently paying. One of the other things that we've looked at is a surge pricing model that says you're going to peak and valley, and we showed kind of that graph at the last time that we got together. Fridays in December, spring days that we'll see, professional development days that we know are pre-planned. We may look at a surge pricing model where we pay additional fees to the substitute because right now education looks at a flat line approach, meaning every day is exactly the same.
Right.
But the supply and demand laws tell you that when you have a greater need, you're going to pay more money. So your Fridays may pay more than your Tuesdays.
But that surge pricing comes back to us. We actually pay more.
You would determine that. But this all goes to, as we start to analyze your district and we determine what buildings are struggling and where you may be struggling. And the great thing about the ASAP system is if you click on a substitute's name, it'll also tell you what other districts that use ASAP they may be working in. And after we do an analysis, we could come back and say, your migration pattern shows that they are working in other districts, and we may want to consider some type of compensation rate or some type of reward for additional days worked within this district. But that all comes after we have a chance to look at your system and identify what the needs and concerns are.
That would be a concern that we're paying different to. Speak to the pay piece, because what I heard you say, David, was it sounded like we have a pay rate of 100 and something, I think, right? What is our...
Yeah, for regular subs, it's $100.66 a day.
Okay. they will still get our pay rate.
Correct.
And then on top of that, we pay a percentage to
Correct.
inside.
And so where the savings comes is we don't pay taxes, payroll taxes, worker comp taxes, potential benefits, if they're certified to TRS, IMRF. So we take all of those costs to the district, and those get lumped into what the 30% charge was. So the cost of this, at the point of what we're looking at from an 85% fill rate, what we guesstimated was almost really a cost-neutral initiative.
We pay TRS on retirees or
No,
on
on certified subs.
certified staff who are there, okay. I will tell you the one negative I've heard from the retiree community is they just aren't really interested in going over and resubmitting with you guys when they're already in our system. It's like, they almost feel like they're doing us a favor by subbing, and so if you're going to make it extra work for me, and this is a half a dozen or so people that I periodically meet with, they're just not interested in it. So that is a concern, because they are happy to work for us, but they just don't want, and when I say, but then there's not limits, I can't counter it, but I'm going to say that that's a comment.
Certainly concerns that come from retirees and other districts that we operate with. What we understand is it's an education process. They're concerned of the land of the unknown. They're not sure what this means. How long is it going to take? What am I going to have to do to onboard?
Right, are they going to have to do a background check?
Yeah. So
everybody who onboards with you will do the same background check they do with us?
Correct.
We pay for that, or do you?
So typically we have the employee pay for their background check to matriculate over to us. Part of our conversations with the district is how are you handling certain things, like your drug screening and other things. What we want to do is make sure that the transition is seamless as possible. So we want to understand who's currently paying for that and make sure that we matriculate over the same way.
Well, and part of that seamless transition is if we have people in our system who have already gone through those checks, will they have to go through them again because of the new employer?
With some of the things, they will have to, because that's federally
Like what?
regulated. I-9s, W-4s, so anytime you have a new employer, you have to fill out that paperwork.
No, but something that would cost us money. Another background check, another drug screen?
Yeah, that would not cost us additional money.
We won't have to do that, okay. So you talked about targets, and you said that our fill rate was 79% last year.
And it's currently 79% right now.
Currently 79%. So do we have, I didn't look at the contract again this time, do we have a target fill rate that you need to meet? I mean, are we putting that in the contract?
No,
it's not in the contract.
No.
That's why
Why
my
would we
line is
have a
on.
target because if we're already doing 79% and they come in at 70%,
Right.
all we did was pass, and we didn't do as
Right.
well, much to your point.
Yep.
Why would we not have a goal or a target that we expect them to meet, and a consequence if they don't
Yep.
meet it?
Well, we went the route of an easy out for cancellation of the contract. So as we set up metrics with Insight in terms of not only fill rate, but customer service and other pieces, if we're not happy, what we've put into the contract is a 30-day notice for no clause, and we can opt out of the contract. So that was more of a encompassing way to end the relationship rather than just specific metrics.
But if they weren't meeting a you could also write the contract that if they're not meeting the target, it's automatically terminated. Why? I don't understand why this district wouldn't want to push to have a target, so that we know that that this was all worth the effort, and that they're really striving. I mean, goals, that's what we're saying, right? We want goals for academics.
Yeah, if
Why don't
if
we want
wanna-
goals for our outsourced?
I think we can talk about a goal, and then have that be clear that that is something that, after a period of time, would lead to us considering the opt-out. I mean, that makes sense.
Okay. What did you say, Ms. Holdley?
It really doesn't need to be part of the contract.
Which I'm saying, you can just set a target, right?
Yeah, you can set the target internally. If it's not being met, then you could
Just be
terminate the
transparent with our
contract
partner.
in accordance with the provisions.
Well, and transparent with the board, too. I mean, right,
Correct.
not just with the partner. Everybody needs to be on board to give you it's motivation, so that anybody who wants to go work at Harlem would come here instead, no. And you mentioned outsourcing and that we do outsource speech and nursing and everything. We don't do that because we want to. It's because we haven't filled those positions, and we have open positions. Substitutes this is a little different breed.
It is. I just want to alleviate the fear that we don't ever do this and put people in, adults in front of our children who, where we've outsourced that service.
Right, but most of those outsource or like a contract for speech therapists, they're with us all year. They're not filling in for a day here and a day there. We bring them in as a contract employee for that.
Sure.
For long term.
One thing I just wanted to add is we are filling these at 100%. We're just doing it with teachers that are missing their planning time, missing common PLC time. So this is getting filled. This does damage morale. This is uneven in other buildings. And so I don't think we have a great deal to lose, and I think there's a great deal we can learn from this group's expertise, which is why I'm supporting the contract here. I agree wholeheartedly with putting in an 85% performance target. I have great confidence that that they can meet that. I don't think that has to be within the bounds of Mrs. Holdley saying that doesn't have to be within the bounds of the contract. That can be just something we talk about and negotiate prior to coming back in 2 weeks. We can talk about what a reasonable year 1 and year 2 target would be. I think we have to be realistic about that it takes time to get things rolling. But at the end of the day, the damage, going back to Jaime's original point, the damage that this does of not filling was apparent in our pilot today that we talked about at Kennedy Middle School. The damage this does is apparent in some of our morale scores where people don't have time. So I really would ask that we take the feedback from the board, bring back at the next reading. That's why we wanted to get this additional feedback. But I feel really strongly that we believe this is a partner that can hit that kind of a target and will outperform us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. And I'm tired of going out to faculty meetings and having to, and there is a huge statewide and nationwide teacher shortage and substitute teacher shortage. That's not going anywhere. And so having a competitive advantage and expertise is something that I want to go into, and I guess from my perspective, I hope the board gives us the freedom to explore this option. Final thing I will add is this is not like moving to something that is an equipment-intensive outsourcing decision. If 2 or 3 years from now, if for whatever reason this company does not deliver like we believe it will, it is not a difficult business to get back into. There's very low barriers to entry for us getting back into this business. We still maintain the data in our ASOP system. We still maintain control. So I think with what we can do for morale, what we can do for student achievement, I would love for us to have a chance to go back with our potential partner here, negotiate a clear performance target over time, over a 2 or 3 year period, outside of the contract, so that we're transparent on the front end and move this to discussion forward, because we've got a humdinger still with Dr. Munson coming up. So,
You're doing the same thing. Wait a minute. We're doing the same thing we did when you cut conversation. I have a list, and you did. Well, I'm sorry, you took the floor when it was my turn. So, but it's a time to get questions answered. So, please tell me how unemployment works. It's not that I'm against it, I just need the questions answered. And
Sure. We're a private employer, just like any private employer that you may see on State Street, that if somebody no longer works for the organization, they're welcome to file for unemployment with the state. We pay a portion or percentage of the of employer taxes to the state for unemployment. They'll file. The state will make a determination whether they've qualified for unemployment based on how many hours they've worked and if they're qualified for it, and then they'll be compensated.
so people are under the impression that because the school year is sort of seasonal, that they can employ for unemployment during the summer
They
every
absolutely
year.
can.
Is that true?
That is accurate, that they can apply for it. We're deemed a 12-month employer, so we don't have the ability to give what's called reasonable assurance that we're closed during July and August, or June, July, and August during the summer months, so they can apply to the state. What I can't tell you is I don't control state unemployment, so they're going to look at how many hours they've worked in the measurement period, and if they've qualified for it. Typically, they do. The folks that are working often are granted unemployment. We do even have folks that are applying for unemployment during winter recess, during the holiday break. So folks that become very savvy at this, they understand when they can apply for unemployment benefits, and they do receive compensation for it.
And that's your experience in other states?
That is correct.
Speaking of other states, we're kind of a guinea pig here, right? I don't know if you are already set up in other districts in Illinois?
So Illinois just passed legislation last summer. It became operable January 1st,
Right.
2019. So I don't believe anyone else is operating these services in the state at this point in time.
Is there a lot of difference in what you're able to do in other states versus here based on the legislation that's been passed?
No, I would say that what we see from a legislation standpoint in Illinois mirrors many of the states that we've worked in. Between Joe and I, over the two companies that we've been involved with, we've opened this program in 9 different states. So we are familiar with what it takes to open a facility, open a team in a different state and understand the state hiring guidelines. What I can tell you is the metrics for substitute staffing, the needs of district, the absenteeism of teachers seem to mirror themselves across all of the states that we've measured the data on. 10% absenteeism for a calendar year, peaks and valleys at certain times. Districts will have their own kind of lifeline that we measure on, but a lot of the metrics that we see and the incentives to substitutes all mirror each other.
And who pays for the onboarding for the 60-hour employees that don't have a bachelor degree?
So in many states that we operate, the onboarding cost, if there's a state fee or a financial fee to pay, we have had the employee pay that from their onboarding. We have had conversations with Rockford to understand how you guys are currently handling the onboarding. As I understand it, your drug testing, the district is paying for that. So we want to make sure that we mirror.
I'm talking about the PD that's required for somebody who has a 60 hours of college versus a full bachelor's degree. There's some sort of professional development that they have to go through. Who
Yes.
pays for that?
Yeah, so we run an in-house professional development academy for all the folks that we would onboard. There's no cost to any of the professional development that we train on, so we can certainly offer that to them at no cost. We also use Global Compliance Network, or GCN as it's referred to, as our kind of learn-as-you-go training module where there's thousands of different training courses that they can take online that should satisfy.
And those
them.
all satisfy the state fee. Last
Correct.
question is really for administration. So we currently have permanent subs in the buildings. Will we continue to have permanent subs in the buildings?
Yes, they will not be impacted by this.
Okay, so wherever we have those, and we pay benefits on all of those, but your permanent subs, we will not pay, you will not provide any benefits other than they can get in the marketplace.
It just so happens that we both call them permanent subs. Our terminology and language has been catered to districts to make sure there's no misrepresentation. So if we need to change our permanent sub to a building-based substitute or a different terminology so it doesn't provide confusion to the district, we're happy to do that.
That's a good idea.
We'll call it guest teacher, yeah.
Thank you for letting me ask those since I...
Okay, Mr. Escobedo.
Yeah, it'll be a quick one. I want to clarify my concern because I fully agree with Mr. Connor, 100%, and this is exactly why I have this concern. My concern is that you guys are actually going to do a really great job and have 100% fill rate. But we are creating 2 different incentives. My concern is, and we are creating, by us approving this, we may be accidentally providing a Band-Aid on a containment. We're containing the issue as opposed to addressing the root cause of the issue and incentivizing, Inside has incentive to get 100% fill rate. Now administration and everyone else don't have the same pressure to address the root issue. And for example, I think it was Mr. Rollins that had previously suggested, let's start working on okay, there's a teacher shortage, but there's many other things we can do proactively. Let's start overhiring, because we know we're going to have a need regardless. And what's the worst case? We overhire, and we end up having some of these teachers support some of our neediest schools or challenges, right? So I guess all I'm saying is my concern is that we have competing interest, and we are... Administration may no longer have the incentive to address the issue, work with REA for future contracts, manage the actual root cause.
So I would just address, I think that's an excellent point, Mr. Escobedo, and Goal 4 that we are addressing tonight has a 5-point incentive for us to demonstrate how we're developing talent pipelines for teachers. We can always move that up if the board would like to, if you're concerned that that this fill rate, if the company would be so successful, we do have that incentive where you were holding me accountable, and I'd be happy to raise that to a higher percentage point if you'd like to see that. I don't know where we'd pull it from. but we can have that conversation.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Dr. Munson?
Thank you for your time this evening.
All righty. We'll present our last item, which is Illinois Empower School Plans and Learning Partners.
Well, thank you for allowing the best to come last.
You are the best.
So what we are presenting tonight is all of the compliance components that really meet our requirements for Every Student Succeeds Act, and in Illinois it's referred to as IllEmpower. So what you have today is several attachments, and those attachments really give a summative overview of what we had to do, our compliance components, for our 2 tiers of designated schools. What I want to emphasize here today is there is a component of that that really requires us to work with external partners. Basically, all of the schools that are designated as comprehensive must choose at least one approved learning partner to work with throughout this school in the 4 years that follow. So what we did is we just want to provide an overview of those IllEmpower learning partners that we have chosen as a district to work with, and at the same time answer any questions that you may have about the process, about our learning partners, or about the plans that you have received. Tonight, again, is our draft overview. We will come again at the end of this month for an approval so that we can hit our compliance, which is at the end of this month. So again, the learning partners had to be attached to the school in comprehensive. All of the schools also, though on our targeted list, had the opportunity to also choose to work with a learning partner if they chose to. They had to meet compliance through the through ISBE, Illinois State Board of Education, and they have to either fall in governance and management, curriculum and instruction, and culture and climate. So our learning partners fall in those categories. In the slides, as well as in your executive summary, I have included again the list of those comprehensive schools, the list of the targeted schools, as well as the list of the commendable schools that had the opportunity to submit a plan to access funds, because in the initial assessment, they also received funds under a different designation. So these are the learning partners that we have chosen. You have a PDSA that has been provided tonight that gives an overview of more of extensive services for all of these partners. You've already heard about District Management Group, or DMG. I'm going to talk a little bit more about ECRA, but the rest of these listed here will provide targeted support and training to the schools under comprehensive and/or targeted for differentiated support based on the school plans that we have provided to you today. And I did, just for your reference, just to give sort of a summative view, I also have included slides in this presentation that gives a brief overview of each of these organizations, as well as the funding that it will cost. And that's a summative funding for each of the schools that will be accessing these particular partners. I'm not going to go through that tonight because, again, you do have that information, and you do have access to that, as well as in this slide, on the virtual slide, those are links directly to these organizations to provide more information. The one that I do want to focus on just a bit is ECRA, because ECRA is going to provide us more in the management and governance support, and so it's a little bit different than the rest of our learning partners. This, again, they're going to provide 2 levels of tiered support, and I'm extremely excited because this really, truly complements the work that we're doing with the scorecard. And these 2 tiers, this is a visual. You don't have this. I'm happy to share this with you, but we just created this because we wanted to give you a visualization of how all of these parts and pieces fit together. So we refer to our scorecard continuously. The scorecard was created collectively internally for our accountability system. And I have a slide just to sort of show you again what that looks like. We've brought on Decision Ed, and they are building our data dashboard for accessibility. That allows individuals across our organization to truly drill down to see student-level data. So the Decision Ed dashboards have multiple widgets that allow us to see data that reflects our strategic scorecard, or the actual metrics within that scorecard. What ECRA is going to provide is 2 levels of services. The one is the predictive analytics, and that has come up continuously tonight. That is going to allow us to truly see where are we at, and most importantly, where do we need to go, and how long do we predict we're going to get to our strategic goals. So they're truly going to take those metrics embedded in our scorecard and combine them to provide us with the analytics that we need to have to understand deeper our story and where we need to go, where students need to be, and how long it's going to take them to get there. And then they're going to take all of that and summarize it in a dashboard. A very easy, simple to read dashboard that provides summative scores for every single school, and a school-to-school comparison based on trend data for our entire scorecard. So they're going to filter in all of our analytics, they're going to filter in all of our dashboard information and provide us with a summative overview of how we are doing. And these are the questions I know that continuously come up, and they have the dashboard and expertise to provide this information to us. So it is complementing the systems that we already have. So briefly, what does that look like? This is the school scorecard we created. So this is our internal accountability system. The data dashboard, you've seen some of the widgets in the weekly board updates, but they have dashboards that individuals are allowed to drill down to receive student data, but individualized based on that metric, not correlational data. We're going to work with ECRA to create a strategic dashboard, which gives us an overview of our why we are going down this journey. And then it gives us a district dashboard. So if you can imagine each one of those tiles would be a school, and you would determine annually where schools are at in comparison to one another based on the metrics in our rating system in our scorecard. The schools would get a deeper dive based on every single metric in the scorecard with color-coded metrics based on our rating system. And then as we get deeper, we'll do some progress monitoring based on school improvement and the data analytics. Where are schools at? Where are the bands at within each school? Where should we be? How long is it going to take to get to where we need to be? So this is the overview of what ECRA is going to provide. And again, there's a budget impact. The rest of the slides, as I said, really take each of the rest of the learning partners and give a summative overview. But I want to take a step back because you have all of that information in front of you and you have all of the several attachments that we've provided. And I just want to give you the opportunity to ask our team, which includes Dr. Vosberg and Dr. Wolf, any questions that you have about the process, about the information in front of you, or the learning partners in which we need to work with this school year.
Anybody?
A lot of information.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. The benefit of going last. I can say, just as everybody sort of absorbs this, this was a very intense process. We've already partnered with the Regional Office of Education, who has been a fantastic partner. Each of the schools identified in these two categories had to go through an extensive evaluation, the Illinois Quality Framework. They had a very strict timeline of the end of January, and then they had to build these plans by now. So they were due last week, so we could present them today, but out of compliance, they are due to the state of Illinois by the end of this month in order to both hit compliance and to receive the funds that have been allotted to our school district.
I feel like I need a remedial class or
Yeah.
something. You know, it's like, because to me,
It's a lot.
Illinois Empower was about grant money for school improvement,
Yep,
right?
and that is what this is.
Is that's what it is,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that is correct.
But you have to use that grant money with approved providers, and like district management is one, and
Yep.
and there are other ones or whatever.
Yep.
So,
That is accurate.
So if you, just
so
to...
I'm not as dumb as I thought.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
You've been paying attention.
That is accurate.
All right, good.
Just want to add that if you, so the plans that you're reviewing and approving, it's an attachment with 320 pages on it. I don't know if anyone had any questions on any of those pages.
Okay.
No.
Tim has it in a binder, I believe, if you want to see the enormity of
If you
what
really
that
want
was.
to get to the meat, if you want to get to the meat of what schools are doing, you scroll down to question 4. Work plan for school improvement, question 4. It's the last part of each school's plan. It's usually around page 11 to 14. And it's usually, it's about a 2-page summary. And it's going to tell you what they're going to do. I've been working really hard with the schools to make sure that they are trying to get better at the things we're already doing. So a lot of the initiatives are around staff development, around PDSA, numeracy, literacy. We've got one school that's going to work with a partner around climate and culture in the school. So these are things that are already priorities in our system. And you're right, Mr. Scrivano, this is part of the state plan to support schools that need assistance. And we're thankful that they're giving us money. That's usually not what they do. They usually give you a label and some targets with not a lot of support. So they did give us some money. They did give us an expedited timeline, which was a challenge. But I think the schools, working with their school improvement teams, with teams of teachers, have done a nice job of putting together some really solid plans for work that'll take place later in the spring and into the summer.
So who at the building level is kind of like the monitor?
The principals.
It's the principal, okay.
And I echo what Dr. Vosberg said. The schools have worked tirelessly to really get to this point. The school assessment that they had to do was very intensive, very time intensive. It had to really elicit a lot of thought, and it really brought them down to one or all three of those three areas listed: governance and management, curriculum and instruction, and culture and climate, to really ensure that the schools were focusing on their greatest area of need, and then their partners do reflect that. And only the schools that really fit into the comprehensive category have to, they are required by compliance to utilize Illinois Learning Partner. The targeted group is able to if they choose to. But that is part of the mandate.
Are there state people that will monitor our success or progress, or?
So we do have one individual who's been assigned to Rockford, and she has been working with us and our support team. Our support team here at Rockford is very extensive. She has been working with us and has come with us to work with principals, and she's really been our thought partner to ensure that we're meeting compliance. She will not be on the other end for approval to ensure that we're, following through at the other end. And honestly, right now, I'm not sure who that team will be, since some individuals at the state level, including our state superintendent, are no longer there. So, but there will be a team of individuals at ISBE that will approve our plans and then provide feedback. But really, we will know at the end of the year to see where our schools are designated. So the designations will come annually. Any questions?
Anybody else? I think their
Thank you
brains
so
are
much.
drained. Okay. All of these items that were presented tonight under new business will come to the board for an approval at the February 26th board meeting. Any other further agenda items or comments? Mr. Rollins?
What I hope is a really quick question. So we've had all these snow days or days off, cold days, whatever they are, most of which have been in the third quarter. And I know at least one teacher is getting kind of stressed about how far behind she is in the third quarter. But apparently the third quarter ending hasn't changed. Are we changing the end of the third quarter? Or what do we do here?
I will have to get back to you on that because this is kind of not unprecedented, but it's up there. Certainly in my tenure, this is the most days we've had to use. We're at 7 right now, so we are on our second, what the state refers to as an act of God day. So we do know that they will get Casimir Pulaski Day back on March, I believe March 4th. So that's one day we'll get back in the quarter, but we'll still be down 5 in this quarter. So I will have to work with Dr. Vosberg and the schools team to talk through this a little bit. My suspicion is we will probably keep things consistent, but we are adding 4 additional days on the back end, so it would make some sense to tweak some things. I don't know. Again, this is the worst we've ever had it weather-wise.
And then similarly, and this is a parent comment, I've now had parent-teacher conferences canceled twice. I'm only speaking for myself. I would be fine if we skipped parent-teacher conferences this semester.
Well, we need to collect our data for, so we can get our parent engagement data, so we're hoping we can still get them.
Okay. Mr. Escobedo?
Yeah, a really quick one, because Tim just reminded me of it. So yeah, with all these cancellations, and given that we actually have a contract with a lobbying group that may be underutilized, is there anything that we can do to get them to lobby to change the test dates for Park and whatever else? Because, I mean, some of these storms was all over the Midwest.
One of our principals actually brought that up this morning, middle school principals, and our testing coordinator, Andy Holmes, is going to check with the state to see if there's any possibility to give us extra 5 days on IAR. So we'll check on that.
That's a great question, I think. I would think
It's a great thing to pursue. We would love to take that opportunity.
Okay. Take a motion for adjournment. Moved by Mr. Connor, second by Ms. Siegel. All everybody in favor? Okay. We are adjourned at 9:56.